Where's that?
Okay, Mike, we're ready.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we're planning to go to Croatia.
Get the
in this,
back seat. This is kind of nice.
Yeah. So, yeah, I didn't know that was called the Dalmatian Coast. Yeah. So you're doing more of it than I am. You're kind of in the Don Ham, he's somewhere around the world,
Is this projected over the speakers? I can't hear.
Yeah.
John, they didn't give you a gavel?
No gavel.
Go.
What's the point of being a chair if you don't get a gavel?
I'd like to call this meeting of the City of Delafield Economic Development Focus Group to order. Let's start with a roll call, please.
Craig Reinders.
David Simon?
Do you want to do the roll call? Okay, yeah, we'll let her do it. That's right.
We do the roll call, if you can hear me.
Go
All
for
right.
it, sorry.
Sorry. I
That's
looking
okay.
at her and you.
Alderperson Jackie Valdy,
I am here.
Plan Commissioner Bob Weiler,
I'm here.
Jonathan Kemen,
Here.
John Siepman,
Here.
Jerry Holton,
Here.
Ken Beckman,
Here.
David Simon,
Here.
Scott Cranky,
Here.
Craig Reinders.
Here.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
All right. Can I entertain a motion to approve the minutes from the April 27th meeting?
So moved.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Any additions or corrections to the minutes from the 27th?
Can
Hearing-
I ask that you just repeat when we have the motion, who made the motion and who made the second?
Ken
Okay.
Beckman moved.
Jackie second.
All right. So we have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. All right. On to public comments. For those of you that are here tonight, thank you for being here. And if you do have any public comments, please state your name and your address before you begin your comments. And please limit your comments to 3 minutes. If you agree with somebody else that's already stated something, all you have to do is say, I agree with the person in front of you. I don't think we need to go through it over and over. In the interest of time, we're trying to wrap this up by 9:30 tonight, right? Or 9 o'clock?
9:30.
9:30 tonight. So, do we have anybody here that would like to make any public comments? Okay. Do we have a microphone? So,
Yeah.
My name is June Savant, and I live in the house that John Nagy built on Mill Street at 741. He ripped the old one down and put the new one up. And we just moved in about a year and a half ago, and we love it. It's so peaceful, so quiet. And then we found out that they wanted to put all the lifts at the end of the bay. I don't know where they're coming up with that. It's going to ruin the look of everything, the quiet, the serenity. You wake up in the morning, there are people out with kayaks, kids playing in the water, and this is all going to be gone. Not only that, but our taxes are very high on the lake. And when you put all those lifts down at the bottom, our value of our house is going down. So if anybody thinks they should put the lifts in, I think they should contact all of us and say, maybe your taxes should go down this much. And that's the only way I would ever even consider putting something down there. People that rent don't usually take care of stuff by themselves the way we homeowners do. And there'll be more partying down there, more noise. It is so quiet and peaceful, we just love it. And it's not going to be the same ever. And I know everybody has a right to the lake, but when you rent, if it's an apartment, if it's a car, or anything else, you don't take care of it like you do your own. And so I vote no to any more construction down there. Thank you. Have a good night.
Done. Give it to the next person who wants to speak. Yeah.
Chloe Weinschneider, 834 Mill Street. this is gonna be a little sketchy because I didn't know it was limited to 3 minutes. Now, this committee was marketed as a Delafield Vision Committee, and it was formed, and it's now called an Economic Development. So I want to know what the real agenda is. Economic means development, production, and management of wealth. Okay, thank you. And vision means intellectual foresight. And so it's perplexing that I hear business-driven thoughts, one for green space, and then there's a want for a downtown pier. Projects and goals could negatively happen in the community if and its natural resources and challenges are not protected and addressed. So what should the community know? Well, number one, what was the origin of this committee? And two, is there representatives of all skill sets, tradesmen, historian, tech people, architect, landscaper, arborist, educator, business manager, and water specialist. Without this variety of members, the committee lacks diverse thinking and becomes mono-thinking, and collaborative thinking is non-existent. My husband and I have been in Delafield for my husband's been here for 85 years, and I moved in and I'm here 72 years. What has really changed in Delafield? There are a few positive changes. Now, these are changes that took place within our 4 generations, the great-grandfather, the grandfather, the father, and the son. Outhouses to indoor plumbing, no street signs and 1 street light. That light was for the fire truck so they could fill their tank truck. Gravel roads to paved roads. There were improved DP services. We had 1 constable, and we now have a professional police force, and there was a volunteer fire department, and that has also changed to a professional firemen and paramedics. What has happened are some negative examples. The mud turtles and frogs in St. John's Bay are almost non-existent. Firefly population is greatly diminished. More trees are removed than being replaced. More buildings, creating flooding. Wider roads, elevated polluting runoff and speeding traffic. Farmland and natural habitat reduced. The lake and the river have record high pollution, destroying the natural ecosystem. Alarmingly, we had, and that was in my lifetime, 30-foot wells, and the wells now are at 100 and 200 and plus. And that last negative, water, is vital to the existence of everyone and everything. Just reflect and digest our Waukesha neighbors. They had an abundance of water, and they were known for their healthy mud baths and the white rock bottled water. Both are gone, as is the city's water source. The Lake Michigan water pipeline is being constructed, and when completed, the water bills will be 3 to 4 times greater. This is food for thought. Most of us in Delafield have chemically free, wonderful tasting water, which is great for the humans, the wildlife, and our aquifer. Water, a natural resource, should be the #1 consideration for all development. So just what is this committee?
I would like 3 minutes, Tricia Vukadenovich. 801 Mill Street, I yield my time to this lovely woman.
And if you're wrapping it up, that's fine. We just do need to, because it's a working meeting, it is
Okay.
important to stay on
So
time.
for these reasons, the downtown pier violates all protocols for healthy and sustainable water. Water is the most valued commodity, and each generation is assigned to be the temporary custodian of the water. And it's so that to protect the groundwater we use daily, and the water in our lake and rivers that are host to all living things and to all connecting waterways. So just what is this committee? Is it a wealth management based on trendy or immediate wants? Or is this a vision committee practicing intellectual foresight with sustaining policies for the next 7 generations as does the Native American tribes. Delafield supports a healthy economy, but it's with the protection of sustainable basic needs. In closing, I'm sharing a comment to a traveling veterinarian that I have dealt with, and he's very familiar with Delafield, and this is his quote: "What the hell has happened to unique, beautiful Delafield? It is becoming just another USA town." I want to thank you for your time, and thank you. And I want to thank all vets and first responders that protect the freedom of this meeting.
I'm following 150 years combined years here with 5. I'll try not to speak too fast. We try to hit a good time limit. Chris Pizzo, 805 Mill Street. I'm also here to talk about the proposed pier at St. John's, really in the context of why you're here. As I started looking at it, I'm like, how do we put together something we can have a complete look at this proposal? And then I read why you're here. And I thought it actually was terrific. The layout of the goals, the cost of community services, how you're looking at projects and their economic impact. So I'm actually fairly and really energized that you're actually here and doing this. So my request is making sure this project is viewed with the goals and the methodology you've laid out and done in a timely manner, as we have November is the time that there will be a vote to put capital money into this project. So if you could do that analysis, and then we could get together and go over the results. When we talk in November, we'll be fully informed. I mean, just things to please look at. When you put in a pier in a capital project, things are attached. There'll be other upfront costs in the park. The police may have to do something for their launch. These type of things. Ongoing increased maintenance in the park. There are costs attached. Let's look at the total cost of ownership of having this pier, because that goes to the economic impact. There are people that are much more versed on me for the ecological impacts, speaking for those that really do live in our bay that can't speak for themselves. And in general, there is going to be some kind of benefit. I understand that, but you have to measure it in reality. And that's what I'm asking you to do with this whole project. That is the key. I love this town. First time ever I've ever said where I live and felt really good about it. The important part here is, does a project lift up Delafield? Does it raise our revenue? Does it make it a better place? Or is it just kind of nice? You're going to hear a lot of objections to this pier, and they're real. They're not negligible, and they're not Armageddon. But the positives also aren't quite as real. I don't want to hear one more time, hey, I asked 50 people and they all thought it was great. I promise you, if you asked my children when they were younger, if you want to eat candy all day, they'd say, yeah. Do you want a pier where you can park and go into town? Yeah. But if you asked them that and said, every boat that goes into town is going to go in front of your house, get caught up in the weeds, mix up muck, and mess with your wildlife, you're going to go from 100% to really low. So that's my perspective. I live with someone that reminds me that I do not know everything. The key that I ask for you, look at the overall benefit. If it's just kind of nice and there's a little energy behind it, I'd ask you to look again and say, is that coming off a referendum, the kind of project we want to get involved in where expenses can add up? Or is it lifting Delafield? You know it when you see it. And I promise you, if it lifts Delafield and makes it a great place to live, I'll be the first one, if I'm inconvenienced, to say, let's do it. I don't know that I'm seeing that here, but I am looking forward to you going through the process completely, thoroughly, realistically. And where it lands, and then we'll make a decision in November. Thank you. Anyone?
Lorraine Bonnywell, 761 Mill Street. My husband and I are against it. What is this going to do to if it goes in on the corner there to the police boat house and the police boat coming in and out of there? And another thing, St. John's, when they have the camping for the kids, they always come down in there and they go swimming and everything. What is that going to do to the camp, to St. John's camp? It's going to lose it. And we like watching the kids when they come down, when they bring the kids down from the camping and they're swimming and in their canoes and stuff down there. We're just against it.
Can I just clarify something? Because I might be missing something here, and the group may be too. we're not is there a specific project? I don't.
They don't have to be on the agenda. For citizens' comments, they can speak to anything.
Okay,
And the pier was mentioned multiple times in our first meeting.
Yes,
so
access to
that's what made
downtown.
them.
Okay,
That's what
I just
made them-
wanted to make sure that it
Yeah.
sounds like there's a specific project and I'm not aware of it, so.
No,
okay.
it was just brought up enthusiastically,
Okay.
and there was concern, and any
Okay.
public meeting, they can speak to anything.
Sure,
We
absolutely.
want to know, is it a project you'll be taking on looking as you look at land use projects?
Okay, I just wanted to make sure I understood.
Yep.
My name is Beth Shelmanek. I've lived on West Shore Drive for 25 years. And what's your exact address? 2212 West Shore Drive. I'm very familiar with St. John's Bay. I actually have 2 friends that live there that I could bring my boat to, tie it up, and walk into town, and in 25 years I have not.
You're behind the post. If you could just come this way a little bit. Thank you.
Okay. Negawicka is different than Okachi, Pewaukee, as I'm sure all of you who live in this area know. It's family-based, it's community-based, and when we go out on the lake, we go out to enjoy the day. We don't plan on bringing a change of clothes to pull up, if that's what the goal is that people who live on the lake could come to town and use the restaurants. It's not going to happen. That's not what Negawicka does. We don't have the luxury of all the restaurants that Okachi and Pewaukee have, so we're not accustomed to it, so that's why we're not going to really do it. There might be some new people on the lake that might want to do that, but the majority, I would guess, would be a no. And the biggest concern I have is that the DNR deemed that there were several areas in the lake that are considered, I don't know if the term is pristine, that they could not be dredged, because I'm in an area that needed to be dredged. This bay needed to be dredged, and it can't be touched because of the DNR restrictions. And to have boats coming in and out of here, we come in with our pontoon, with our motor trimmed up as high as possible because there is this much water. And you have people coming in that don't know boat etiquette, don't know waterways. It's a disaster, not only ecologically, but also for people on these these stand-up paddle boards, these canoes that are coming in and out. It's dangerous. And these kayakers and stand-up paddleboard people, I believe, do not have to have a light on. They can be out there after dark. And if you're encouraging people to come here, use restaurants, use bars, and then get back in their boat and go, not a good idea. And I'm pretty sure everybody here is aware of how many deaths were in Wisconsin, increased number last year from the waterways because of what happened with COVID. Nobody had anything to do, so they went and bought kayaks, stand-up paddleboards, boats. It was on motorboats too. There were so many deaths. We do not need any more increased traffic on this lake at all. It's not going to be good for anybody, especially the bay.
Julie Hollingsworth, 813 Mill Street. And I have, I can echo the sentiments that everyone has already addressed, but I also have a strong concern about the ecological impact of this. I agree with what Beth just said about the DNR. And so I would be interested in seeing a further study and whatever the response has been to this point from the DNR, so that we can all make informed decisions as well, not only for us, but for future generations. Thank you.
Tracy Konechny, 801 Mill Street. I'm just going to back everything that everybody from the community has stated.
I didn't use my whole 10 minutes.
Okay, fine. I guess my question is to you. My name is Trisha Vukadenovich, 801 Mill Street. I don't have my glasses.
Amy Barrows.
Amy, okay,
Yes.
Amy, you said, you made a comment about you're not sure what we were talking about.
And so I'm confused as well. So there is nothing on the agenda regarding the pier down here?
Well, it sounded like the comments were very specific to a particular project, and what this group is doing is looking at the city as a whole and looking at, we call it an economic development land use related project, where we're looking at the economy, the social environment, the environmental protection as well, trying to balance all of those and look at the city to see if there's any opportunity for changes in the land use categories in order to help balance the city's budget. At the last meeting, we tagged, and I don't know if you saw the meeting, we did tag properties and areas that we want to focus on. And there were a couple of different locations that were identified for potential access from the lake to downtown in the business community, but we haven't had any conversations yet. And what I can tell the group is tonight we will be when we get into the mapping exercise, we'll be focusing on the northwest quadrant of the city, and then heading east to the 83 corridor where there's several farm fields that are vacant. We will not downtown is such a large topic that we will can't imagine we'll get to downtown tonight, but we may talk about access opportunity to downtown. I don't know where or what that will look like. And we're certainly not talking about or voting on any specific project. That's for the city to do through a formal process.
Here's the concern, and I speak to my constituents, a lot of the people here, not all of them, but many of them are mine, and my concern is that the pier keeps making appearances at every single meeting, Lake Welfare, Parks and Rec, Plan, City Council here, and it keeps being brought up that it's a great idea without having really talked to the people who actually live on the bay. So and I know protocol would suggest that it makes better sense that while it's still in its nexus before we've put a lot of time into creating the rules and without actually doing an environmental impact study or really figuring things out in a more cost-benefit analysis, as Chris mentioned, that folks let you know where they stand. And that was really the point. Okay. And as I said earlier, on any open public hearing, the people, they're the ones that are paying the taxes and paying for all of our development ideas, basically. So they have a right to be heard before it all takes off. Because I've been on the other side at City Council where they say, well, it went through here and here and here. Why didn't you say anything? So rather than wait until it gets to that end point, when the budget is voted on, I think we need to say, why is it there? And does that make sense? And if so, is this the best plan? So.
Okay, so could I get your name, because I didn't get your name?
Jackie Valdi.
Jackie Valdi?
Yeah, 816 Mill Street. I'm your common council person.
Thank you, Jackie. I think I know. And as we ask these questions, and your response was a little alarming to me when I know a DNR representative is here. So I think it's a little bit more than just the economic development of the sidewalks of Delafield. It's dealing with the waterways and the downtown.
And I just want to be clear, we are, when we talk and have these discussions, that is the idea and the goal, and it came out in all the survey data to be considerate of the environment and the resources in the lake. So
and of the community and the homeowners, I hope.
We're just getting started.
Thank you. I yield my time.
Okay, so no further public comment. Thank you all. Moving on, we have the expectations and rules of participation. Amy?
Okay, so this was going to be on the agenda for last meeting, but we got hung up on other things. So as we work through these multiple meetings as a group, and I know somebody in the audience had mentioned, do we have a diverse group? We have a very diverse group. That's very intentional to have different ideas. As part of that, we want to make sure that we're being respectful of each other. So I'm hoping that we can just sit down and come up with 2, 5, or 10, whatever you think is appropriate as a group, rules for us to follow as we get through, go through these meetings. And I guess, I will just start with my rule. which would be to be, allow everyone to speak and be respectful of their opinions and comments, but to be succinct with those comments, because we do want to hear from everyone. We only have a couple of meetings left. They're 3 hours long, and we need to make sure that we're able to get through the content. So please be mindful of being succinct in your comments and thoughts, and allow everybody the opportunity to share their opinions. That's maybe 2. Anyone else?
Well, can I just suggest maybe staying focused on the task at hand and on the issues that are in front of this committee as opposed to other issues that are not in front of this committee?
Okay. Anyone else? Anyone? Voting. So as part of this, we will need to vote on things. And so, what I will intend doing is preparing a final report with the group's recommendations, and it's really your recommendations. It's not, the information's not coming from city staff, it's not coming from me as the city planner, it's coming from you as the group. So as part of submitting your recommendations, I would intend to share all of the opinions, whether you're in the majority or not, so that when that is shared with the Plan Commission and Common Council and other committees at the city, they see the different sides of it. However, we would vote on a majority, and I think the committee needs to decide whether or not you're doing that on every property. And actually, I was surprised. I think that, like, as we go through tonight's meeting, the agricultural properties, those are pretty individualized, so we could probably vote on them property by property. As we get downtown, it gets a little bit blurry, where you may have put stickers in areas, not just properties. So I don't know if you have any comments or advice that you want to talk about right now to determine at what point you vote and when that becomes part of the official recommendation of the focus group. I think tonight we can safely go property by property, and then we can reconvene on that issue next week. I just don't want to get hung up on how and when we vote on matters.
Amy, can you give me a little bit more on what you have in mind there?
For voting?
Yeah, what are we, we're an advisory board,
yes,
providing direction and strategy. What are we going to be voting on?
Yeah.
Like changing zoning from?
So, whatever the recommendation might be, it might not be a change. It could be like that you feel that the density should change to a specific category, and on that we would want we would want to vote so that the council knows what the majority feeling is. You may all come up with 9 different opinions, and then maybe that's the vote is you had a one-way tie, but we do want, instead of them reading 9 completely separate opinions, we'd like to get to a consensus as much as possible. So can we all agree to support the rest of the members' recommendation for this particular use?
So, Amy,
in some cases, it might be, it might not be changing the zoning. It might be, I know John's going to talk about conservation subdivisions, and we talked about it last meeting. So I'll just bring that up. Maybe the recommendation is on these properties we prefer or require conservation subdivisions. So it could be a variety of things, but we want to try to go with a consolidated mindset as much as possible.
And I think it's important that this is a recommendation to the city.
Yeah,
overall, that this is not a binding anything with the city. The city planners and the council have to make that ultimate decision on what gets done. We're not making a decision of, we're just guiding.
Yeah,
and I think sort of setting the tone for a specific area. And I think having a vote is important to see what the consensus level is. If it's 50-50, then maybe we have to revisit that. If it's unanimous, then it's pretty obvious what everybody thinks of it.
So Amy, I was going to ask, and you were starting to go down the path, to maybe come up with a bit more precise operational definition of an example. I'll throw one out just off the top of my head. We're voting on whether we think it should be light industrial versus condos versus homes.
Right.
That sort of thing?
Yes.
Yeah.
Or this is ideal for industrial or commercial, and the whole group agrees to that. You know, that would be the idea.
So just a perspective on this, and this is coming from a lawyer.
Yes.
With a lawyer's mindset.
Yes.
But like, you know, like when we have jury trials, we are like really hung up on, you know, go through the process and collect all the evidence
Yes.
and hear all the views and opinions. Don't make up your mind, you know, until the very end, and
Yes.
don't vote until the very, very end. And I don't know how that exactly applies here, but it feels. I was just
Yeah.
sort of struck by your talk of voting, because it feels like really early in the process to me to vote. I feel like we're just
Yes.
starting the
We
conversation,
are.
and I feel like we're voting on stuff tonight seems
Sure.
early to me.
Well, that's a potential rule. Maybe we have the conversation going around the board, and at the last meeting is when we make decisions to vote. Sometimes you think you have a really good idea, and as you scroll along and come up with different concepts, you might change that. So that could be one of your decisions, is that we start by going through. I mean, the one thing we have to be mindful of is we have very limited time to work on this project, and we have to keep it moving forward. But we can go through the city and then come back and do the voting, or talk about a certain area, and if we're far enough along at the next meeting, you know, kick it off with some votes.
And maybe along the way, we get a level of consensus for each little area, so that it's not unknown until the last day.
Right.
And at least we get a barometer reading.
I think that makes sense.
Just to keep things moving.
I think I would prefer to lean towards having the voting towards the end of the process, because as we talk about a particular area and then move on to the next area, again, things develop in those discussions that may bring a different perspective to that past discussion you might have had on there. So, it doesn't have to be at the last hour of the last meeting, but maybe let us accumulate a little working time so we can just get comfortable with the process.
Sure.
And then move into it maybe next meeting or something.
Okay.
Are we looking at the potential to rezone these properties then? Is that kind of the end state?
You're not officially doing anything, but there could be a recommendation for the city should consider amending the land use plan, or downtown, maybe it's doing a deeper study of a downtown development plan. I don't know what the conversation is going to have
preemptively
yet.
get ready for future development that may occur.
And if it's, if you want to talk in the terms of density, for example, that can be a recommendation, and we can figure that, we can also figure that out at the city level. How does that actually take place? And can be part of my final report and findings to you. But we don't have to get bogged down in what does that formal process end up looking like. We just want your ideas. Okay? Did I spell consensus wrong? I did.
It's CONSENSUS.
That's right.
See here?
No, you're, actually,
right?
that's right. That is right.
I never won the spelling
I'm
bee.
not a
I
good
don't like, I
spelling
feel like I'm under pressure here writing stuff down on a board. Anything else?
I would just second on Craig's comment that, let's gather all the information, see
Okay.
what you guys are going to provide to us, and let us process that before forcing a vote or voting on anything.
The other thing is, people may listen to a meeting and then want to come and comment at the next meeting, and then it would be important for you to get that information to help you make those decisions. So, okay. Anything else?
Anything else?
Succinct needs a C before the T.
C at the.
There you go. So your
much better.
instinct was right.
My boss is right there.
Oh, there he is.
folks.
I use
You're a
Grammarly
planner,
for
not a
everything.
speller.
I'm a planner. And I'm used to the computer. Okay.
All
good.
right. Okay, number 6, explanation of city's land use related guiding documents.
Okay, so I want to do this as quickly as I can, but I do think it's important that you understand some of the guiding documents. And I apologize because I do have a cough that is related to allergies, I promise. I'm not sick. But, so the city has a, I think we're talking about land use really here today, and probably the most prominent guiding document is the 2030 Comprehensive Land Use Plan that the city has. It was developed in 2009, but very interestingly, when I was just perusing through it, the city has had land use planning going all the way back to the 70s, which is really early. So, I mean, the city's been very proactive in their long-range planning. It wasn't until 1999 that Wisconsin developed a law, which was the Smart Growth Law, that required that all municipalities adopt a comprehensive plan. It includes 9 elements. I'll go through them. Issues, and you'll see this in the city's plan: issues and opportunities, housing, transportation, utilities and community facilities, agricultural, natural and cultural resources, economic development, intergovernmental cooperation, land use, and implementation strategies. So, that the idea there is to link all of those different components together when making long-term decisions to benefit the city at the best you can. So then, because of that Smart Growth Law in 1999, the city has gone through a few revisions, and again, the most recent one is 2009. The 2009 version has not been updated, where the law does say you need to look at it at least every 10 years, but the city did look at it last year and did make a decision that no changes were needed at that time. Some of that is related to the fact that there's new U.S. Census data available just this year, and so much of the information relies on demographic information. So this is a good time to have these types of conversation, because it's almost a preemptive move to potentially amending a land use plan, and then the city will have the opportunity to update the census information.
Amy, does this process technically qualify for a look at it or a?
That's not what we're doing. There's
Okay,
a whole statutory element to it. There's notice periods and public input engagement, and we are doing some of that. I would say it's kind of a mini plan that could certainly be built into and summarized within a land use plan document, for sure. I'm sure we'll touch on several of these different topics in some way or another. And the city says it really well in their plan. They say that the plan identifies where a community's at, where it wants to go, and how to get there. So that implementation piece is really important, and that's probably where you will come up with a lot of recommendations that the city can consider in the implementation element. If you go to the presentation I gave at the Plan Commission and Common Council, I didn't go through it, but there's probably 3 slides in there where I just plucked out, I don't know if it's goals, not always implementation, but goals and ideas that relate to land use. So I do encourage you to take a look at the Delafield Growth website and just take a quick look at those 3 slides, 3 or 4 slides that talk about the different pieces that are in the current plan that the city may or may not want to continue in the direction of. Then the important thing is it's not really a regulatory document, it's a guiding document. The regulatory document is the zoning code, which is the implementation piece that you use to, again, implement the ideas of the plan. So that's where you get into your zoning and your dimensional standards and the types of uses that you can or cannot have. And then to go into the zoning code, the zoning code has a couple of elements that I think are worth just talking about quickly. One is you've got your zoning districts, and it tells you what kinds of uses you can have. It gives you those dimensional and bulk standards, and it'll usually say whether or not you can have certain accessory uses and or what uses are allowed by a conditional use. A conditional use is a use that is uncommon enough where it doesn't necessarily fit into a zoning category neatly, and could potentially be allowed in multiple different zoning districts. So the code allows it through a public hearing process so that the city has the opportunity to look at those properties on a very individualized basis and look at the site conditions to determine whether or not the proposed use meets the purpose of the ordinance. So that's a conditional use. And there's public hearing, I think I said that public hearing requirements that go with that. One conditional use in the city's code and in many codes is a planned development. And John's going to give a talk on conservation subdivisions. The city, if somebody were to do a conservation subdivision, that would go through a planned development process. And what it allows is flexibility in those lot size and dimensional standards, provided you meet other performance measures that are identified in the code. So maybe you can have a half-acre lot instead of a 2-acre lot, but you need to provide common open space or a trail system, put in some extra, native vegetation, or do something that's beneficial above and beyond what traditional zoning would allow. The one interesting thing that Delafield is a little unique when it comes to planned developments is that you provide flexibility in lot sizes, widths, and dimensional standards, but there's not an incentive provided for a density increase. And I know there's a lot of discussion about maintaining the rural character, but what happens without that incentive is it's hard to encourage developers to go that direction because it's easier and on the front end potentially cheaper for them to just split up 12 rectangular lots and use the existing road frontage of a public road and just have a bunch of driveways come off of that road, for example, instead of doing something a little more creative. So typically other ordinances do provide incentives. And I think the perception with that is that you're increasing the density, therefore it's having an impact on the environment. But you oftentimes see more open space and more protection of the environment by consolidating where that development occurs. So just something to think about that is indeed unique about Delafield. Then there's also rezone. So if somebody wants to come in and they don't meet the zoning district, they want a 1-acre lot instead of a 2-acre lot, they need to go through the process to rezone their property. And in order to rezone the property, the first thing we're going to look at is the land use plan to see if it meets the long-range plan. And if it doesn't, then they also have to amend that process. We have a land division ordinance, which also applies. And with the land division, if somebody's going to divide land, we look at the land use plan again to make sure that it complies and that the use would comply. And I don't want to leave the stormwater, there's a stormwater ordinance, so there's a lot of different ordinances that do come into play, but these are the big ones. There is a downtown development plan that was adopted in 1993. I think we can look at that a little bit more when we talk about downtown. It is a pretty old plan, so I'll peruse it to see if there's anything of great interest in it. Correct me if I'm wrong, Mayor Atwell, but I'm not sure that it's used as frequently as maybe it was originally intended, because it is getting pretty old. And some of the recommendations in that plan have just been implemented, the downtown districts and flexibility that's provided downtown, et cetera. I will at some point here just want to go over some market data, not related to downtown necessarily, but there is some interesting information about the business environment in Delafield too. There's also a 5-year park and recreation strategic plan that was just adopted for 2020-2024. That helps identify existing and proposed public park systems, trail systems. So as people come in and they propose developments, or the city's working on their own project, it doesn't have to be development related, we can go to that plan and use it as a guide to make sure that those elements can be followed through on. And then that plan actually does lay out goals and costs related to existing or proposed park improvements. So maybe they want to put in a jungle gym in 2 years. That gets laid out in the plan. And then there's a settlement agreement between the City of Delafield, Village of Heartland, and Town of Delafield, which is worth the group understanding. So that that was done in 1998 and 1999, and the idea behind it was to provide orderly land development boundary agreements and shared services. There's water and sewer service requirements as part of that plan. And then there was the city of Delafield, for example. I'm just going to show you because this is the one property that affected the city of Delafield. You can see on this east Delafield line, you've got a pretty straight line, and then it goes into what you would think might fit into the town of Delafield. That was an annexation into the city on the this. I don't know if you can see what I'm outlining here. These two eastern parcels. So as part of that annexation, any development of that property, so that one and the property to the south, require site plan review, and the Village of Heartland also needs to comment and report on any action that takes place. And the city also needs to seek participation for development on Highway 83 between Oakwood and Highway 16. And I think on that property, I want to say I didn't write it down. Oh, here. I'm pretty sure it's limited to property shall not be used for retail purposes. And then they define retail purposes, sale of commodities, goods, or services in small quantities or to ultimate consumers. So when we talk about that area, we'll have to be considerate of that provision that's in place. And then it does also require within that zone that when a development is to take place, traffic studies and intersection requirements might apply. So that's my quick blurb on the documents that the city has. Hopefully that was a little bit helpful and didn't put you all to sleep. Any questions on that?
I do.
Sure.
And I apologize, I had surgery on my mouth, so I kind of sound like Elmer Fudd here. Is there any other order agreements other than the one you just pointed out on 83?
That's a good question. That's the only one.
And I don't need an answer now, I'm just curious.
I'll double check. That's the only one that I'm aware of in the city of Delafield. It's the only one.
Only one? Okay. Thank you.
Oh.
And I don't know the voices well enough to be able to tell voices for behind the scenes, so.
Any other questions?
Are those, so the review by the Village of Heartland, is that just a remnant of the extraterritorial zoning that was on it as the town property?
There was, I don't know what I mean, I was not here at all, so I don't know what really initiated, but it was, you know, some properties went to the village, some properties went to the city, and I think it, you know, it helps control land grabbing from towns, and then there were sewer and water service requirements. So the agreement seemed to have a lot more to do with the Village of Heartland than the city. And there might have been some village-city type stuff too. I can certainly share that agreement.
What powers does the review grant? For instance, the Village of Heartland over a decision that the city of Delafield might be pursuing there?
Yeah. All it says is shall be subject to review of the village and review and approval of the town for that particular property. But otherwise, generally in some of these other areas, it needs to be submitted for comment.
Okay.
And report action. So I think the city uses that in making their decisions. I'm not sure they're bound to their...
The village is just review and the town is approval and review? Is that how you read that?
No, I think in here, so anywhere from Oakwood and Highway 16 on 83 goes to the Village of Heartland for comment and report action. But I think, I'm not sure that they're making a recommendation. I'm not sure that the city is bound to those decisions. But then on this, what they call Nagawicca View Dairy property, which is these two pieces, it says,
You used the word approval in that one, I think, when you
yeah,
referenced that.
there's several land use, site plan, and architectural issues concerning the development shall be subject to review of the village and review and approval of the town. So I think you're probably right. Well, the attorney in the room would have to, it sounds like it's more of a review of the village and actual approval of the town. The reason being is it's surrounded by single-family subdivisions, and the town wanted to control what happened on their boundary. So I haven't dealt with it yet. I'm sure if that time comes, we'll have to read through that document pretty carefully. It's lengthy.
It's really unusual for an unincorporated area to have powers over an incorporated area. So it would have to be something that was part of the negotiation when that was done. I remember when it was done because we were in the town doing lots of development at the time, so we had to sit through a lot of those discussions, but I don't recall all the details. I'm sure it'll come out in that document.
I think part of it too was sewer service needed to go through the town and the village. So that might be.
And water, right? Because water goes up.
I think there
to
was some water. Yeah, I mean, it's a give and take thing. We'll give you this if you give us some land, kind of thing.
Any other questions about the land use guiding documents? All right.
Okay.
Now we get to do the survey results.
Survey. So I'm going to be honest with you. We're still working on getting a good, nice summary to you. Mayor Atwell can keep his comments to himself over there, but I may have left the entire, as you know, the survey was open-ended. It allowed you to answer open-ended questions. We have thousands and thousands of responses. So we're working on how to most efficiently summarize that. And I know it was suggested and is common that there be a multiple choice section to get immediate results. And I just really wanted the responses to be organic and people's initial thoughts instead of being fed the types of answers that they should be responding to. But as a result, we're working on it. But I do have some stuff that I can share.
Are you grouping those comments into buckets?
Yeah, so what we're trying to do, and we did for question 1, so I can share some of that for you, the strengths, is going through them and identifying some themes and trying to categorize them into themes. And then we did do a word cloud, which tells you how many times a word was used. It does require more analysis, though, because those words are used differently. And so you have to be kind of careful. So I'll give you a sneak peek, but I do want to come back to it at the next meeting. So, but real briefly, what I can tell you, and I am really sorry about this cough. We had on the open-ended question part of the survey, we had about 295 responses with complete data. There were some partial surveys that were completed with identical answers and then no names reported. So we did pull out that information knowing that somebody started it and they went back out and it did end up saving and counting those as responses. 90% of those folks own a home, as you can see on this graph. So most of the respondents are single-family homeowners, and only 15% have children in this school district. And we'll get to it in another area, but a majority of the respondents were 55 years and older. So we're definitely getting a certain demographic as part of these responses.
Sorry, Amy, did you say 295 distinct? How does that, was that, did you have an expectation of, that seems low to me. Is that, did that strike you as low, or was that consistent with what you anticipated?
We originally thought there was closer to 500. I think the visual preference survey numbers were higher, so I don't know, again, we can look at the sources a little bit more closely. There might have been, well, we'll get to it, might have been almost 100 more responses. we were hoping somewhere between a couple hundred and 500. Almost everyone responded based on the postcard. So, it was a very good idea for the city to send out that postcard to everyone. It's just, it's hard to get responses from people unless you really go out and, go to the events downtown and have tables set up, and we just didn't quite have that time, effort, or allotment allowed. So a majority of the folks either lived in a subdivision or on a lake. And again, almost everybody, 88%, were in single-family homes. Just quick, there was a decent variety on the length of time people lived in Delafield. Again, quite a few with 21 plus years, which is a pretty long time, but at least you do have a cross-section there. Close to 50-50, a few more females than males responding.
I like the other.
What's that?
The other. You
Oh.
had one that was other. 1%.
Yes. What age range are you in? Again, we've got well over 50%, 55 and older. Half the people are full-time, and then you've got a big sector that's retired. Cross-section of level of education. Most people have a bachelor's degree. 38% make over 200,000, a majority make over 150,000. Mostly white, no surprise there. And then again, the postcard really was the largest sector. 11% word of mouth, so good job. Jackie, I think you were referenced in here. It does ask, where else did you hear about it? And
2 respondents from you, Jackie.
Yay, me. I do have a group that is connected to my city, my alderman site, and I send out things, and I sent the link to them. So, but yeah, that's probably 50 people, that I sent it to, so.
I mean, David, do you think the Citizens for Responsible Growth, 3 people, is low? The thing is,
Seems low, but
I think a lot of people may have, they may have gotten the postcard too, and they chose the postcard because all the residents got the postcard.
It may have given them the impetus too, And isn't it like when you send out bulk mailings, they expect a 3% response rate, and that would be good. So I thought it would be 1,000.
Oh, people?
I did. I don't know. I tend to be optimistic. It's just helpful. I'm very curious to see the written things.
So that's the demographic. As far as strengths, so I am going to put up a word cloud, but again, we'll do a little more. It's not responding. Okay. What I can tell you with the strengths is that downtown was used 118 times, by far the most frequently used term. Lake Nagawicca, or lakes, or lake, there's a variety of ways it's used, was used 86 times. Parks was used 75 times. Restaurants, 70. Shopping, easy access and proximity, again, really high. Safe environment, 40 times. Schools, 31. Rural, and then it started to be kind of close and frequent, similar words: rural, small town, quiet. We're all in the 20s, and then trails were used 27 times. And then if you take all the responses and break them into themes, there were a lot of comments based on a quaint, rural, small town, then downtown, restaurants, retail, and small businesses, and then a third theme was parks. The lake was a 4th theme. hiking, biking, walkability. Large lots, single-family residential was another theme. Safety and low crime, open and green space, other than parks, so outside of the park comment. Schools and big box stores, and specifically that the city has a lot of big box stores in appropriate location along 94 and 83, and that the accessibility to that is appreciated. So those are the strengths of the city. 2 and 3, we have to do more work because those get challenging. A lot of, actually, when you do a word cloud, a lot of the same words are used as in the strengths. So they must have a different meaning. So I have to, luckily my daughter's playing volleyball for 4 days this weekend, so I can look at the results and we'll have more information for you next time. But threats kind of had a little more clear response just doing word clouds. So the threats included, there were 65 responses on taxes, 64 for development. There were 2, housing was used and affordable housing was used. I need to analyze that more to understand in what context, that it's, whether it's good or bad, I don't know. And like younger generation was used, and so we just need to look to see if people want younger generation or consider it a threat. I'm assuming a threat that there's not the affordable housing for them. Pollution, multifamily, apartments and overdevelopment, traffic and rentals were all hot ticket items.
What was the last one you mentioned?
Rentals?
Rentals.
Did I say? Traffic, rentals, overdevelopment. So I'll put the word clouds and that demographic information on the project website. I can do that right away tomorrow. I think what happened here is I'm losing I lost my access to my SCH account. So I might have to start over. Let's see if I can get in here. All right, I am going to have John do his talk if you don't mind. And then I'm going to actually, because I want to go over the visual preference survey with you, but I need to restart my computer to do that.
Can I use, so
yeah.
I can't use this to,
Can you
I don't have
maybe?
I don't have an
you don't
HDMI.
Oh, okay.
I have a laptop, but it doesn't have an HDMI connection.
That's fine. You can use.
Well, you need to restart yours. Can you use mine?
Why don't do you want to take a 5-minute break and I'll just restart my computer? Because I do want to show you the visual preference survey and then you can plug it in mine. One other thing I want to talk about before I forget is the cost of community services study. So that's been completed. It's under the city's review. So we'll bring that to you next week too. We want to make sure that information is correct and shows what it should. The one very interesting thing that came out of it, which they want to double check and make sure the numbers work, is the cost of residential development is lower than typical. And that may be because the home values are really high and it offsets, the taxes related to that offsets the cost of the city services. I don't know, but we will come back at the next meeting. Dan Bowditch, who is the economic development specialist, is going to give like a little video for you to listen to explain the results, and then I'll try to explain them a little bit also. Okay, I'm going to just quick do this if everyone wants to take a little break.
enough, which is a rare moment in my life,
Oh.
that I'm too soft.
At least it's you getting yelled at, not me.
So I found out about Canada.
He had to hire somebody because we got to plow through two
Okay.
neighbors' drives to get to us.
And none of it is LED.
He can't get to us
Yeah,
without
so
plowing.
is that guy still on the job?
Chairperson.
Oh, that's good.
Mr. Seaton, chairperson.
All right, good job. We're reconvening here. We're missing one.
Oh,
Better get my mic on. We're still missing Bob.
we can wait. He was down here.
Is this new census data?
No, I think this is from a year or two ago, but I'll just share real quickly. It didn't really fit in our agenda tonight, but I thought I would share it because it's kind of interesting. These graphs are showing the major employers in the city of Delafield compared to Waukesha County. And you can see in the city of Delafield, most of the major employers are either retail, the big box retail, or restaurants. Where when you look at Waukesha County as a whole, the largest employers are, there is some retail and what have you, but it also includes medical centers and products, and manufacturing is also a huge employer in Waukesha County overall. So it's as part of this project, we're not talking about necessarily retaining and attracting business opportunity, but it is interesting to know that we do have low industrial use and low medical use, which is a employment for the future with the aging population. And I know there's some discussion about potential uses that will include medical facilities, and then the industrial use. What's interesting, and I just think everybody should keep it in their minds as we go through the city. It's one of the cheapest types of uses long term, as far as the city providing services. It offers a lot of employment opportunity, and there's really only one industrial park on Kettle Court, and then is there another one other than Kettle Court? There's Enterprise Drive is kind of a pseudo area. It's actually zoned business. It's not zoned for manufacturing. It's hard to find the right spot for it, and you have limited boundaries and opportunity within the municipality. But if there's any way to find an ideal location for another industrial park, it would probably fill up quite quickly. I know just working in other municipalities, those users are looking for spaces to build and operate.
Amy, does your survey show how many of those employees reside in Delafield?
Not on this survey. There is other survey information that talks about how many people reside. I don't have it open, but in the presentation I gave at the first meeting, I think put a couple statistics, how far people drive and how many people work and live in the city. It's certainly available information.
Amy, the stuff that you're showing, is there a way to get a copy of this or view it ourselves?
Yes, I will.
It's on the website.
I have already posted it, yeah. It's on the Delafield Growth website in the focus group page.
Okay.
I added a header, market materials. There's this document, and then there is a report from the Waukesha County Center for Growth that largely talks about manufacturing and how that's such a huge strength in Waukesha County with supporting businesses, different manufacturing companies that support each other. So you can take a look at that. There's a lot of actually, if you go directly to the Center for Growth site, there's a ton of information on Waukesha County, not necessarily the city. So that's that. The visual preference survey. I don't want to spend too much time on it because I will share this with you. outside of this meeting setting, but it's kind of interesting to see where you and the Plan Commission and Common Council and the public had similar or different responses. So I'll try to do this quickly, but number 2, the focus group liked this this building, but it wasn't hugely supported by the other 2 groups. 3, this building had support from all 3 groups, quite a bit of support. So I would, this I would say probably resembles downtown and the new Hendricks building, quite frankly. Industrial buildings, not a lot of support all the way around in general. So here I am talking about industrial buildings and not a lot of support. So this image, not supported by the public or your group, but it did receive some support from the joint city committees. And I'll post this, so I'm just going through. Number 10, the city committees did support this. You got a little bit more, the blue is supportive, a little more support from the public. You all didn't have a huge desire for it. 13, again, a little bit more so from you and the city committees than the public on that development. 13 had support from everybody. And so I think this is a good example. This is actually a good example of how planned developments can be beneficial because you look more at performance measures. So having common spaces and like the fountain or a sculpture or something like that is incorporated.
So Amy, I don't know exactly what we're going to do with all this, but I got feedback from a number of people about this, that people struggled with this because there was no context, right? It's like, okay, well, where's that built, like that industrial building? Well, nobody likes an industrial building, but if it's buried, somewhere where nobody ever drives by, as opposed to downtown, it's completely different. So I think that's several people approached me and said, I didn't know how to answer
It's hard,
these
and I know we
questions.
talked about because it's where does it fit? It might fit here and not fit there. But the industrial thing is actually a good thing to get out of it, that they're not desirable buildings, because then if you do choose a place in the city, you probably do want to choose them somewhere where they're not visible to people. And then, another thing I gathered from this is some of these, let's see, so these types of buildings, and maybe this isn't a very good example, but there's a couple in here. They really didn't get a lot of support. But when you guys entered your information for the DOT exercise, no one really pointed out potential redevelopment of properties that are just like this. And so I think that knowing this kind of information is helpful as we move around the city, because you may want to think about maybe the sites at 83 and 94 are great for now, and we all use them, but maybe in 20 years you're interested in something 2 stories high, 3 stories high with because eventually when you have buildings like this that go on and on, I think you had mentioned that there was a threat that other communities are growing at a faster pace. Those are the types of uses that might create that problem for you. 18 was interesting because the public and your group supported this type of use, which I anticipated would get some support because it's a little reminiscent of like Milwaukee Street or the conversion of homes into businesses. Maybe a possibility downtown, getting closer to the interstate. But the city committees didn't have a huge desire for that. And again, context plays a role. This was another one where you supported it and the public supported it. The city committees didn't at all. So this development's getting a little heftier and something that maybe the city hasn't really thought about in the past. 20, same thing. Let's see. Just want to see if there's anything exciting. I'll give you a brief summary on Residential development, this didn't get a lot of support. This is actually an example of kind of like the missing middle development. These buildings on the right are businesses on the first floor with apartments above. People live and work in the same buildings, and then you've got some multifamily on the edges of the road, and then single family in the back. Everyone really liked this picture. I think it's reminiscent of your downtown, the perfect walkable downtown. Now the chart's loading. So I can share, I don't want to spend a lot of time. I'll share this stuff with you. The hotel, the only one that got a lot of support was actually the Iron Horse downtown, which is interesting because it's a big box building, but that was the one that received the most support. And then as far as residential goes, the one image that received a lot of support was actually the one where the homes were pretty close together, and I think the subdivision is actually in Middleton, and it's a planned development where it's all condensed and they have common spaces, and there's a lot of support for that, which counters the large lots. So we'll move on because it's all kind of similar, but those were some of the findings. I think I can put that in a report, some of the outcomes that came out of it. Any questions on that? It is kind of a confusing exercise, but it helps a little bit in knowing what people like and don't like for sites that could be redeveloped, I think, or used, repurposed differently. Okay, so I think I'm going to pass this on to Mr. Seatman. I'm done talking tonight.
Where do you know?
Do you want me to do that?
Sure.
Here, I think I'm... is it not?
Is it not? So before we start, how many of you moved out here to be in the country? I'm not going to hold you to it. You can raise your hands, it's okay. How many of you, when you moved out here, looked at the city's land use plan before you chose to purchase your home? I knew it.
Yeah, it's true.
Every single time I ask that question, I get the same answer. So we always say, we just had a meeting last night at the Village of Heartland, and we had a barrage of people come in. We're proposing 110 condominiums on 60 acres that was at one time conceptually approved for a subdivision, a single-family subdivision. And there were people in our own subdivision across the street that came out and said, I moved out here to be in the country. Now what's going to happen with all of these cornfields? And they moved in right next to it. And we have on our website a home or a lot buyer's guide, and one of the first things it says is, what's going on around you? Is it going to be a nuclear power plant? Is it going to be a missile silo? Is it going to be an industrial building? It's really important to know, and we've known for years what our county is going to look like. Sewer Pack had it planned in the 50s, and your city had it planned since 1970. That's impressive, and that's really cool. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about conservation subdivisions. This is what we do. I'm very passionate about it. This is our world. And stop me if you have any questions. I'll try to go through it as quickly as I can. But we, in this Lake Country area, happen to be in maybe the largest concentration of conservation subdivisions in the entire world. Hard to believe that, but we've developed almost everything along North Shore Drive in the town of Delafield. Tonight we're going to talk about Hawk's Nest because it's a really simple example of how things are done. And so there's great examples right here. We did Mission Prairie just up the road. We are proposing Hawthorne Farm just a little bit farther up the road. We might even talk about that property a little bit tonight. But this is the approach that we take. This is an old ad campaign that we did many years ago. We're into space, common areas, open space, all of that stuff. And it's a much more creative look at land planning than your typical lots and blocks. So just to give you a brief history, back in 1911, Washington Highlands, if anyone's familiar with this, this is the first master plan community in Wisconsin. And this was done in 1911. It's a very popular place, maybe the most popular place to live in Waukesha. It was designed as a national greenway, so there was a lot of government money. Is it better?
Yeah, just come this way a little bit.
This way?
That's all right. You're right underneath the speaker.
Oh,
So-
that's what it is. Okay. And you can see these little greenways that run through here. They're very small. These lots are all probably 8,000 to 10,000 square feet, so they're not really large. But this green space had a profound effect on our dad, who lived there, grew up there, and those green spaces kind of planted a seed for my dad years ago. And in the 1950s, when it was codified that you could do a planned unit development, then it gave him an idea that, hey, I can get my landscape architect and we can design a subdivision. I'm sorry. I'll stand on this side. We can do a subdivision with a landscape architect that will be far more interesting than, sorry Mike, just having an engineer design it in straight lines. So in Hawk's Nest, this was developed in 1990. This is in the town of Delafield. The property is outlined here in red, 180 acres, 35 acres of woods. It was owned by the Ice Age Trail Foundation. They came to us and said, we like what you do. Can you do that for us and include a corridor for our trail? And we said, absolutely, we can do that. So the first step in developing a conservation subdivision is to do an inventory of all of the important features of the property. Floodplains, topography, drainage, primary environmental corridors. Oh, man, this is terrible. I'm gonna have to stand on back here.
I don't really hear it, so I don't,
You don't hear it?
not that loud anyway.
Okay.
It's not loud, yeah.
It's not loud? Oh, it's
No.
loud
No.
up here.
Oh, is it?
Yeah. So we look at woodlands, tree lines, wildlife habitats, historic and archaeological features, cultural features, scenic view sheds, and soils. And we
You probably don't want to put your hand over it.
Moving closer to the other speaker.
Mine's off.
Maybe the handheld would be better.
Yeah. And you can sing
Yeah,
with
if you
it.
cover the hand over the microphone, it's gonna feed back.
Yeah, it just does it more. Okay. Is this better?
Looks like karaoke night.
Turn it on.
It's on? Okay. So, really, in all development, you have to do this, but we do it in a much more thorough way, and there's a reason we do it, and that is that we design around those resources. So, this is the preserve at Hunter's Lake down in Ottawa, and you can see the environmental corridors are in green and red, and in that case, we use these white areas, which were fallow fields, as our areas to develop. And here's a land use plan for the city of Pewaukee. You can see the green area. This was planned to be residential. This is environmental corridor in the light blue-gray. The green is more woodland, and I'm sorry, this was wetland and this is woods. So those are all things we plan around, just like anybody else would, but we incorporate them into the plan, the land plan for the property. So the first step for us after the inventory is to do a yield plan. And the basis of a conservation subdivision is that we use the same or produce the same number of lots as we would in a conventional subdivision. So planning wise, we do a layout, and we do a layout. Every community is a little bit different, but we do a layout that is actually usable, and we look at it as if we take the density. This is 2 acres per lot, which is very, very low density, especially on sanitary sewer. But in 1990, this was a viable project. This is 71 2-acre home sites. There's no open space in this case. You've got the environmental corridor that crosses, the backs of the lots cross into it, so there's really no control over that environmental corridor. There's no Ice Age Trail corridor in this plan. There's no stormwater management space, so then we would have to probably take the end of a lot here and half of a lot there and maybe the back of a lot or two over here to accommodate that. So this is really a basic plan. It just gives you the number of lots that you can produce. Now the conservation plan, we have the same number of lots, but we've clipped the lots back to 1 acre instead of 2 acres. 2 acres is a lot for people to take care of. So one of our selling points is that you have more or less to maintain and more to enjoy. You've got a smaller lot, you've got the green space around you. Everybody backs up to green space, no matter what, even if it's 50 feet wide or 500 feet wide. There's green space around everybody. And that's meaningful. In this case, this allowed us to project some tree lines in here, and so we didn't have to cut any trees. Trees are really expensive to cut and remove, so we were able to preserve those things. So all of the inventoried items on this property were preserved in this plan. It preserved the 35-acre woods on the top of the plan here. We had stormwater management areas which we can use any of this green space for. The green space is then owned in common by all of the lot owners as an undivided fractional interest share, much like if you were to buy a condominium and have the elevators or the driveways or any of the landscaping, they would all be owned in common and maintained in common. It's easier to work within the topography because you're not constrained by lots going from edge to edge. There's a lot of important things here. We like to see green space on both sides of the road, which some developers call single loaded streets, and we do too. They're very expensive to produce because there's no lots on. And so with the lots being concentrated, it makes it more palatable. This would not be a viable project today, unfortunately, unless the land were free, which is never the case. Because of the cost of development, it would be nearly impossible to produce unless we wanted to sell the lots for $500,000. So this is the before picture. This is the one you saw earlier, and this is the after. You can see that all of this area of trees, all of these trees, all of these trees, and this woods are all preserved in that picture. So it allows you to work around those features and make them amenities in the development. We have trails circumnavigating the entire parcel. We've got the Ice Age Trail that runs from end to end along the north part. And one of the things with the Ice Age Trail and any public trails is that a lot of developers will say, oh yeah, we'll put that in once we get enough money from lot sales to build it, we'll put it in later. And what happens is they get major objections. So we're all about building it up front. Any of the amenities go in first and foremost right away. Otherwise you'll get nothing but friction when you put those in. So some of the important features of conservation subdivisions are preserving the topography and drainage. You have natural landscaping and preservation of wetlands and wild areas and woods. We have a lot of restored prairie in Hawk's Nest. If you drive through there in about a month, you'll see it fully ablaze with flowers. It's really impressive. And it's expensive on the front, but it's almost costless in the future. Once you get a prairie going, it's pretty self-sustaining other than clearing out woody trees and things like that. It doesn't take a whole lot to maintain it versus all of that being manicured in grass and having to spray it all the time, 4 times a year. It saves a lot of money. So it enhances wildlife habitat. It preserves historic, archaeological, and cultural features, just as I mentioned before. There's a scenic view shed at the top on the Ice Age Trail. There is a height easement, so a house in a certain on a certain couple of lots can't exceed a certain height because eventually the Ice Age Trail will have a tower up there that will view all the way down to the skyline of Milwaukee. It'll be almost the same view you have from Lapham Peak, so that will be preserved forever. We've got the trail, we've got stormwater management areas, and it really protects the rural character of the area. And that's something, this is the first time I mentioned it, but that's something that everybody sort of talked about at our first meeting, was trying to preserve that for the future of the city. And with all of those houses set back from the main road, it gives the developer space to put in natural landscaping. Here you can see a lot of the prairie plants. It's not the clearest picture, but we've got trails everywhere. We transplanted trees from areas that we were going to put the roads in to the areas where we weren't, and they were pretty much free trees. We've got a little building in the middle that's sort of a focal point. We do lots of fencing and landscaping to enhance those areas. And in some cases, we've taken houses and preserved them and remodeled them and given them quite a bit of value. This house was sold for $160,000 in this condition, and was renovated and sold for $1.5 million just a couple of years ago. And I think they had a nice profit on that. So these are important things to preserve. Yes?
I'm curious, back a few slides, that 71 lot subdivision, you said today would not be possible. Unless it was $500,000 an acre for a lot.
Because of those lots being so big and so far apart.
What would it have to look like today for a developer?
That's a great question. It would have to be much more concentrated to one side or one end. If you're familiar with, well, it depends on a lot of things. It depends on the topography, the soils, what's around it, how far sewer is away from it, all of those things. But generally speaking, it's going to shrink the lots to about a half an acre to 3/4 of an acre, and the lots will be all in one location. There won't be lots of vast stretches of green space before you get to another set of lots or another cluster.
Is that because you don't have to build more roads and
sewer?
And sewer, okay.
If that were done on a
So
pressure,
it wouldn't look very attractive, would it?
It wouldn't look like that. You can still do it, and we still do it.
Okay.
But it does take a little bit of a different, takes on a little bit of a different look. If that were done on pressure sewer, where you're only 6 feet deep with the pipe, then it might be more viable. If it had water in it, and curb and gutter and sidewalks, not a chance.
Okay.
These are rarely done with curb and gutter and sidewalks, but they can be. The one I showed you in Pewaukee, that was a much larger project. It was 265 acres and 148 lots, so it made more sense. There's more economies of scale there. What
was the cost of those lots?
Those were 180 to 220. Hawk's Nest, the ones you saw here.
Right.
This will shock you. They were between 67 and 79
Per lot.
per lot.
Today, what would it be?
If we did that exact plan today, they'd
Right.
probably be 450 to 500,000.
Okay.
Assuming we got the land for the same price we did in 1990.
Right.
That's a big assumption. So part of the design of the project is to have gathering areas to get people to come together as neighbors and have picnics and have parties and play. And this is not possible, generally speaking, in a conventional subdivision, unless you took a lot away or you took half of a lot away to make it happen. Lots of planning groups like cul-de-sacs, and lots of public works officials do not. These are the most desirable places to live in subdivisions. Everybody says they want to live on the end of a cul-de-sac with southern exposure with a walkout basement and woods behind them. I guarantee. So there's huge value with these things, in spite of the fact that the snowplow guys aren't too excited about it. But when you have a large piece of property in the middle of it, this becomes an outlot. There's plenty of room for snow storage. It's just a quick loop in a snowplow. You don't have to pile it all in the middle and let it melt off and freeze and melt and cause other issues. It's very compatible with home placement. It gives you a nice feeling of, hey, I'm in a neighborhood. I can see my neighbor in the morning or in the evening, but I can go right out the backyard and there's deer and turkey and all of the other fun things that people like in the backyard. So as I mentioned, the recreation trails are important. This is in Hawks Nest. We developed the Ice Age Trail in the project. The original price was $75. This was sold for $125, and it joins the Ice Age Trail on the ridge. If this said Ice Age Trail coming soon, nobody would buy this lot. It would just be sitting there because we had people comment on this. And I live in a subdivision in the town of Merton, and the comments were, we don't want the Ice Age Trail going through our development because we don't want rogue hikers camping in our open space, and we don't want, and my favorite was the nude hikers that apparently frequent the Ice Age Trail. It's just funny, the stuff people come up with. Stormwater management, in the case of Hawks Nest, it was hugely important. This property was just a row crop farm, and all of it drained down to the southeast corner and went straight across Highway E, or Maple Avenue now, and went straight down a ditch into Pewaukee Lake and produced a massive plume of silt every time it rained. Every time. It could be a ½ inch, it could be 2 inches. And ever since we put these stormwater facilities in, we have not seen a plume of silt in the lake. So they do provide some pretty incredible engineering feats. I'm going to just get into sort of how this can happen here at the city, and I'm going to give you a little comparison. But this is, Randall Arndt is a huge proponent of conservation subdivisions. He's written volumes and volumes of books. If anyone wants them, if anyone wants to borrow them, I have a stack of them in my office. I'm happy to bring them in. You can study away on land use and land planning. But he's boiled it down to some really simple steps. To do your context map or your inventory that I talked about. To do a resource inventory and a site walk with the municipal staff, the plan commission, and the electeds. Then do a sketch plan. Just as simple as that. Just like what you see right here. Really simple. Go in, do a concept plan. If there's sewer or any other facilities that need to be studied, it can be done on a red line or on a sketch. Really at a very high level. Is it feasible? Is it even workable? So this is a tried and true process, but most communities don't offer that as an option. So these are the advantages. I won't go through all of them, but the density neutrality of the project is really important. The less is more is important. The chemical application to the lawns is more important. The meadow areas, sometimes we ask for narrower streets as your planned unit development ordinance allows. And this is huge, and this we've been talking about a ton with Hawthorne Farm, and that is that because these properties have their own amenities, it takes the pressure for the municipality to provide those amenities down to almost zero. We've got play sets, we've got fire pits, we've sometimes got sport courts, sometimes we'll have a pool or a clubhouse. That takes all of that burden off of the city to provide those amenities. You can preserve all the wild areas, and even there's a potential to preserve farmland. There's a lot of agri-hoods, they call them, where they have agriculture around them. They're not always popular when the manure gets spread, but that's a topic for another day. And perhaps the biggest thing is, if we had known we were going to build so many conservation subdivisions in the town that were adjacent to one another, we would have had interconnected green space, at least with a trail, so that people could go from one to the next. And they sort of do, but it's not perfect. So here are the challenges. And I'm going to make this, I'll be really quick, but I'll try to make this really simple. Jackie, you're a developer now. You come in and you've got 100 acres and you want to build a conventional subdivision. You just want to get it done, you want to make money for your kids, and you want to move on. And David, you've got 100 acres, and you want to do a conservation subdivision. You're walking into the city of Delafield, you're going to come and talk to Amy, both of you. Well, Jackie, you can come in, and let's just say for the sake of this discussion that it's already zoned for residential, and or the zoning allows for residential use, and you can come in and put 100 lots in, and you have a couple of meetings, there's no public comment, there's no plan unit development, there's no conditional use. You just skate right through, you provide your stormwater, you build your roads, you put your sewer in, you sell your lots. It's pretty straightforward. It's probably about 90 days to get to that point, maybe 120. So now David comes in and he wants to do a conservation subdivision. And I'm not, just so you know, I'm not picking on the city of Delafield. This is all but about 4 communities in Waukesha County operate this way. So David wants to bring his in. The first thing you have to do is come in and get a conceptual review, just like Jackie did. The second thing is you've got to set up a public hearing and you've got to go through a conditional use. And that takes 30 to 60 days to line up. Then you have to get that conditional use and do a plan unit development agreement. That takes another 30 to 60 days. Then you come in with your preliminary plat, your general development plan, and all of that stuff, and you're good to go. But you are about 6 months behind Jackie. So do you see where I'm going with this? That a lot of communities don't allow for conservation development by right. So in the town of Merton and in the village of Summit, you can walk in and not go through that process, provided you fall under the existing zoning and land use plan. I didn't mention the land use plan. That's really the first thing that needs to be looked at. But we'll just assume that it fit for both of you. But you can see the hurdles that are in front of us for a conservation subdivision. So if you want to encourage this type of development, you really have to codify it to make it happen, or at least put everybody on a level playing field. So when I do this presentation, it's often in front of a group of communities. I've done it before the Towns Association, the League of Municipalities, lots of different groups. And the first thing they say was, well, why don't we just make it that you have to do just conservation subdivisions? And I don't think that's the answer. That's not the perfect answer for everything. So I don't know if that's the way to go necessarily. But I would say at least level the playing field. Or if you want to discourage conventional subdivisions, then make them go through the public hearing process and a conditional use and take that away and make it by right for conservation development. Or come up with some balance in between. But it's really important. I'm not telling you what you need to do here in the city of Delafield. I'm just telling you what we think is, if you want something, if you want a specific style of development, then make it easier to do it. And if you don't want a certain development, then put some barriers in between the developer and that development that would be more challenging for them. But not too challenging, because it's not right to, unless you just hate conventional development, it's not right to downright prohibit it with your ordinance. So I hope that makes sense to everybody.
So in that case, you would ask to codify development or densities?
Not densities. The densities are codified between your land use plan and your zoning. That spells out all of that. So that doesn't change at all. What changes is that if I want to make smaller lots right now, and I want to have common green space and some amenities in that green space, the only way I can do that is through a planned development or conditional use. In most communities, it's a conditional use. And so it just makes more layers. And what happens then is that all of the elected officials and all the planning officials can say, well, you know, I like that trail, but I want that trail to be 8 feet wide, paved, and I want you to put steel bridges in over every little ditch, and I want you, you know, you can just layer on more and more stuff. And maybe you allow that in your ordinance for everybody, but when you get a conditional use, usually there's a give and a take. And if you want smaller lots, well, you're going to have to give up something. So it's usually building a trail or widening a road or improving an intersection or something like that. So this way it just sort of levels it for everybody who comes in the door.
John, do you see any communities that are trying to encourage conservation development and allow increased densities if you go to a conservation development?
Yes, that's one way to incentivize it. The county does that. Waukesha County gives you a density bonus, as Amy was alluding to earlier. You know, it usually doesn't amount to much. It might be 10%. If you have 10 lots, it's one more lot. If it's 100, it's 10 more. Sometimes you just can't fit them in. But it is a nice way to encourage it. But some people get itchy about adding more density to an already rural environment. So it's something that really has to be thoroughly studied before it's put into play.
It's just interesting that you hear a common theme through all the comments about the decline of the rural environment, and yet this would seem like a perfect way to address the inevitable, which is urban sprawl, that in and of itself promotes more of a urban look to that sprawl.
Which is funny. Everybody says urban sprawl, which was planned. You know, that all of this development was planned.
Yeah.
But we call this the softer side of sprawl because it's the same number of lots out in that cornfield as it was before. It's just that they're smaller. But yeah, you can do there's a lot of different things. And Amy's been around this a long time. Mike's been around this a long time. There's a lot of ways to skin this cat. And now these two are in the Village of Summit, so that Mike's been around there for a long time. He's got that experience in this area. It can be done so many different ways, but the bonuses are important, but not as important as making it easier to get in and simpler on the front end. I think I'll give you a really simple example. In the Village of Heartland with the condominiums that I talked about, we had to come in with about $75,000 worth of plans before we even knew the project was viable. And to me, that's really heartbreaking because last night we were on the brink of not getting it approved, and that money would have just gone out the door. After we had conceptual approval from the village and we sort of got tagged along that, yeah, we think this is going to work. And then we got to the point last night where it nearly got denied. That I really struggle with. And that's why I go back to that 4-step process to get it out early in a sketch form in the simplest way possible so that it's not a 100-page document of full construction plans before you get there. It sort of puts it in reverse order, but it gives the developer some direction before the developer needs to outlay a ton of cash. And I think Jonathan can probably talk about that all day when it comes to any town and anywhere. It's about 85% require the big set of plans before you even get approved. So it's just front loaded on that side.
So is this development you just referenced, that was condominiums or conservation development?
It is of sorts, yes. It's about 70 acres or 70% open space, which is a really high ratio. But that doesn't take into account the fact that that's right up to the building, and it doesn't account for the lots that would be around it. If it were developed as a subdivision, it would be about 50% open space, which for half-acre lots, which is kind of what it would have been, that's a healthy amount of open space. It's a 1-for-1 ratio of lots to common area, and it gets more and more difficult the more urban you get. So we've done projects with lots as small as 7,000 to 8,000 square feet down in St. Francis, but it won't have vast amounts of open space behind every lot. It might have some around the perimeter and some stormwater and maybe a strip through the middle that people can access, but it's not as generous as what you see in these plans. So the more urban you get, the smaller the lots get, the less open space you have. The more rural you get, the more sprawling it can be with open space. It's sort of a sliding scale with respect to lot size. Any other questions? I was supposed to limit that to 15 minutes and it got to be 20, 25, so my apologies. But those were excellent questions.
it's not the easiest thing in the world to do, but it can be done. And there's lots of good examples to work from that are local. And we've got plenty of information if anyone needs it.
Ready? Thank you. Thank you, John.
Thanks.
That was helpful. Okay, we get to move on to the exciting stuff. Just so everyone knows too, in next meeting, the idea is to work on these maps the entire meeting. So this is our warm-up, and then we'll really get at it at our next meeting. Okay, hold on. Here, you can, is that on? So I did put the maps on the website. Hopefully you've had a little time to take a look at them. If not, that's okay. We will, just going to go to it directly. Okay, so map 5. I plan on taking these one at a time based on the tags, and then if we could just talk about it as a group. Some of these, more rural areas, maybe only one of you put a sticker on the property, so you may have to sort of start or lead the conversation on that particular property. And I would just recommend that you have your own, this is really the part where you lead the conversation, so you have your own open conversation. If it gets out of hand or unruly, then I'll step in. But and then I can help identify when we're running out of juice and it's time to move on to another piece. So we're in the northwest quadrant of the city here, and just for context, so John just gave a presentation on conservation subdivision. Where I have my cursor is a subdivision that they're proposing right now called Hawthorne Farm as a conservation development. They did get approval for the conditional use plan development process and general development plan, and now they'll be moving into the preliminary plat and final plat stages. So we have that to the east of this sticker. I'm not exactly sure what, we'll have to identify what properties exactly we're talking about here. But this is sticker number 92. And I have noted on here that somebody is interested in business. Comments, it says comments business. Anyone remember doing that?
Just to point out on this map, I get all sideways when I'm looking.
You know what I'll do? So
If you go to the website, yeah. But in the website, it's right there. Oh, you don't have your computer, sorry. Never mind.
Yeah, I think so.
I'm just going to go to an GIS anyway. Oh, thank you, Wayne.
Yeah, that's all right.
So it's up in the top left corner,
Got it.
just south of Highway 16.
Yep.
How is that accessed? Is that off of the road by Okachi Ready Mix or through Neshota, or how do you get to that?
It's not. No, there is. This is so I don't know what property this sticker's on, first of all. So I'm assuming it's this property. Does anybody want to claim the sticker?
I don't remember.
Okay. So I'm going to assume it's this Binkowski property, which is directly west of this proposed Seatman development. If I'm correct, the only access is actually through the village of Oconomowoc Lake, this very narrow strip. And I think they're not excited and have said no to providing access in the past anyway. So this one. And this parcel is also owned by the same individual. So they have those two properties accessed through that strip as part of Hawthorne Farm development owned by the Seatmans. There is an agreement being developed by the Seatmans, sorry. They have shown a reservation for a road extension off of Nashotah Road. And, at some point, as these different phases develop, they would be responsible for improving a portion of that road, and then the future developer of the adjacent property to the north would be responsible for the remaining portion. So right now, this property is in an agricultural land use category and in the agricultural zoning district as well. So the zoning district, now I'm going to be challenged. I should be more prepared with this. The zoning district isn't as much as a challenge as the land use plan. Doesn't really allow residential development unless they amend the land use plan. So Seatmans did have to amend the land use plan for their property too. And the land use plan says in there that if amended, it can't go below 1 unit per 2 acre density.
How large is the parcel?
So Binkowski's, there's a 40.7 acre chunk and another, just to make sure I'm doing this, 36 acres.
76 acres.
So over 70, 70 acres total.
So I'm still a little confused. So is there access via Watertown Plank Road?
It doesn't go across. The northern boundary is the railroad track.
Okay, all right.
And then Highway 16.
Got it.
It's possible the only viable access is through Nashotah Road through the proposed
That would
Seatman
be
development.
to the east of what, Bill Bar Farms there or whatever?
Just north of Bill Bar and east. Yeah, we kind of curve down like in sort of an S.
Where's the Seatman development in relationship to this?
It is,
Just go, yeah.
here, I'll just ID. So this area in yellow, and then the area to the northeast, that's largely all wetland corridor. So if you follow my cursor, they would put a road in and it would snake around here to the west and then go north. Now that's a really long road extension for very potentially limited development opportunity to the north.
And are those wetlands protected there?
The wetlands and floodplain are protected, yes.
It's not all wetland. It's a former quarry, so there's a couple of pits that have filled up as kettles with water. We'll wait till Amy turns that layer on. One of the things to think about here is the proximity to the freeway and the railroad and sanitary sewer. As it stands right now, with the road extension and the lack of access to the west, it would be an extremely difficult property to develop at 2 acre density.
Get back to the just brainstorming. What I like to call high-end condominium and a conservation environment.
Could it work?
Yeah.
Not at the 2 acre density.
No, not at 2 acre density. I think that's the point. What I'm hearing is that this is going to be sitting here a long time unless they change the land use.
Where did
Probably.
the 2 acre density come from? I thought we said it was agriculture.
It is, but the land use plan shows agricultural and the density is locked in on that land use plan.
So if it is changed, it's locked into the...
So what happened is the land use plan, the most recent land use plan, actually removed all the agricultural category with the understanding that the city is likely going to develop outside of agriculture. In 2009, they put agriculture back in, and if you read it, it's more of like, I think, a transitional holding category, and if at some point the property is ripe for development and it gets amended to another category, it can't go below, there's two different, 1 per 3 acre density or 1 per 2 acre density.
One other, just getting really technical, that property requires a lift station for the sanitary sewer if they were to do gravity sewer. They could do a pressure system like we've proposed in Hawthorne Farm, which is a lot less involved, but it puts the onus on each individual homeowner to provide a pump to get their effluent into the sewer pipe, where a lift station on this property would be about $1 million-ish.
It'd be,
$1.5 million.
Right now, the sewer service comes from the apartments to...
Here.
So the sewer service, there's a lift station in the Parkland Village apartments, and that there's a force main that comes through and pumps and ultimately goes to Highway C and then into the interceptor there. So the idea would be either a gravity system that would drain into another lift station that would utilize that same force main, or what John is proposing and what we're looking at right now in the Hawthorne Farms is a low pressure sewer where each individual house would have a grinder pump that would pump into a force main that ultimately would hook up to that main force main.
What does something like that cost a homeowner?
Grinder pumps are $2,500.
I'd say all in with everything hooked up, it's about $4,500 to $5,000. A replacement pump's about $2,500 plus labor to put it in. So say $3,000.
Not less than a mound system or any conventional, yeah.
They're huge. Almost all of the lakes to the southwest, Neshota Lake, a portion of Waukesha Lake.
Yeah, that around lakes, it's really hard to get gravity. You're going pretty deep. You have multiple lift stations, so to service around lakes, that's a combination of gravity, lift stations, and then the low pressure. So in this area, looking at what wouldn't, to service the 2 acre density, it makes no sense to put another lift station in where the low pressure, it makes the most sense. And then low pressure, you don't need to go deeper. It's all consistent depth at 6 foot deep, so it doesn't freeze.
It seems to me that if you want to turn this property into an asset for the community, you have to change the zoning or the designation of it, or it's going to sit like this for 30 years or 50 years, from what I'm hearing.
Well, and it seems like the location of the property is, if you're going to have higher density, I can't think of a better area to have it. You're up against railroad tracks, a freeway, it's isolated in the back. There's not a lot of visibility to it. I mean, wouldn't that make sense for a higher density area?
That's what I'm thinking.
There's also no RE1, RE2, zoned, subdivisions of any type around it.
Yeah.
So it's not like you're putting, high density condominiums next to an RE2 subdivision.
I don't think you can see it from anywhere off the property.
Well, I guess let me ask this, who would complain, would be my question. And I mean that seriously, where would be the flashpoints?
Yeah.
Yes.
Village of Oconomowoc.
Do they have a vote in this?
How is that zoned for Village of Oconomowoc up there and then the town of Summit down there? Because that's the two adjoining properties.
I have that written actually in your staff report for Hawthorne Farms. I don't remember Village of Oconomowoc Lake, but Summit I think is a pretty rural category.
But I don't think they'd see it either, really.
Yeah, the biggest thing I think is access for this.
Right.
I can look into that. I know I have it written down for their development.
If you were to live there, I mean, where would your typical like grocery shopping and going out to eat and how, when you leave your home, where are you going? Are you going to Town of Martin or Oconomowoc, or do you think they'd be coming to Delafield?
I would guess they'd go to Pick and Save at 83 or the Pick and Save on 16.
In Oconomowoc, yeah. Probably Oconomowoc.
Right dead centered on that. But I don't think it's any different than the people in Glenview Park or Glen Park to the east of Hawthorne Farm or anyone on Oconomowoc Lake.
And this Village of Summit property is highly restricted on this eastern tier. There's
Kettles.
quite a bit of resource, and I think maybe the topography.
Anything in the woods on that Summit property is pretty vertically steep.
So the access on the Neshota Road, would you have multiple accesses there through your property?
There would be another access in addition to what we have proposed for Hawthorne Farm, and it would align with what we've conceptually designed for the south side of Neshota Road.
But for the Binkowski site, there would be the one single access.
One long, and it would be a long cul-de-sac, but, so, like the Seatman development has a cul-de-sac here, and they're gonna develop this field first. And then this would be another phase where a road would be constructed going north, and that would be the single access point.
How many properties would fit in there today with the 2 acres?
Well, on Binkowski, if you had 76 acres, roughly speaking, it would be 38 lots. But
Wetland and floodplain don't count for density, and corridors at 1 unit per 5 acre. So knowing that it gets kind of
so it's
challenging.
probably 32 lots. 30.
So when we've done traffic studies, I would think in 32 typical housing units, what that would, so the one access on the Neshota Road is not a big deal for 32 houses. And then one you're saying somewhere else.
Except I think I heard you say that it's not viable for 36 homes on that property. It has to be 110 for it to be practical.
Maybe not 110, but it's got to be a significant jump from what it is today. And just in full disclosure, we're not pursuing this property, and I don't want it to look like I'm trying to influence what's happening with the approval process on Hawthorne Farm. So this really is outside of all of that, and I don't think that it would be. I know it wouldn't be viable at the 2 acre density.
Yeah. What else could go in there other than agriculture or something like you showed earlier, conservancy subdivision?
Well, I think given its proximity to the freeway, it would be an ideal industrial site, but you have no access. So that kind of precludes it from being used as a...
Yeah, so it looks like what, Sawyer Road is the freeway on off right there?
I think you'd want a heavier duty road for the ingress and egress for an industrial site, and you're surrounded by residential at that entrance, so it'd be tougher there.
And I do think the site it has challenges. You know, if you converted it to, like, let's say a business district or whatever, you're going to have this really long cul-de-sac that's going to snake through some residential lots too. I don't think it would be necessarily desirable for a business entity. And then residential, there's going to be a lot of costs associated with road construction for the development, even at a higher density. I mean, it gets pretty tight in here, so
it has its challenges. Maybe the best use would be a little higher density condominium type use, where you could do a planned development back there. You could have, do you allow for private streets in condos? Or do you require them?
For private street, I think.
Mayor?
Yes, there has been private streets.
So with private streets, you can control the width of them somewhat more than you can if they're public. You still have to be able to fit emergency equipment through, but
So, I mean,
it
one of
really
the,
takes some study.
I mean, if that's potentially the highest and best use, I mean, that could be the recommendation until we come back to this, is condominium / conservation development in order to make the development viable from a cost perspective.
That makes sense.
You know, there's some parallels to that site and the, I don't know what it's called now, but the development that's down in the gravel pit behind Garden Gate Nursery. Single access point. There's got to be, what, 70 units, 80, maybe 100 units down there.
You're talking about the apartment?
The apartment complex down.
Summit Lakes or whatever it is.
Is that what it is now?
I think there's like 300 apartments.
Yeah. And that's a single access point, not saying that you would have that density, but it's, you know, it's kind of a similar situation where it's up against the freeway, not a lot of good access to it other than a single point. So, I mean, it might make a lot of sense for, you know, a more dense development in there.
Have there been proposals?
I was going to ask, hasn't there been a proposal like a long time ago for high-density residential on this property? I thought, wasn't there something that
There was discussion. I think Pinkowski had some ideas that he wanted much higher density up there.
Yeah, I think the original easement through there referenced some kind of high density through there. But then the land use did, you know, when it was updated, that went away.
Would that be desirable for condos?
Just about anything right now is desirable for condos.
Is it really that hot?
Yeah, the demographics are shifting so much with the boomers selling, but wanting to downsize and split their seasonal homes from here to the south. It's hugely popular.
So probably the most frequent question I get is whether or not a property can accommodate multifamily or apartments.
And the biggest selling type of real estate right now in southeastern Wisconsin is side-by-side condominiums.
Really?
Which, if you said 5 years ago, are
Right,
condos
yeah,
selling? People would be twiddling their thumbs in a condo model because nobody would finance them and nobody would want to move into
And
them.
everything was going apartments because you couldn't get financing on it.
It could be
but now
different
you
5 years from now, right?
Yeah.
It could be.
Something like
Market's
this get
always
actually
changing.
develops, and who knows?
But you have to look at the demographics. We haven't had a demographic that would use it, and now the boomers are much more inclined to use that type of housing than they were before. The traffic difference between condos and single family, condos are about 38% less traffic, daily trips per day. Daily trips, I should say, are about 38% fewer.
So when you talk about potentially considering recommending condominiums on this property, is there a limit in this style? You know, because condominiums can range from single-family residential-looking condominiums to the multi-unit 2 or 4 unit buildings, or 8, 16, 24 unit buildings. Some municipal ordinances based on the district will actually cap the number of units allowed per building, or the overall size to just control what the environment looks like. I don't know if that's important here or not to you as a group, but
I think we've already said that you can't see it from anywhere else. So I guess it would be what would make sense to develop it and what the density would be for a developer to be willing to do this, given all of the access and other issues.
Well, and I think the other thing is I'd want to apply the cost of services model to what would be the ideal highest return to the city on a development, is, you know, from a density standpoint. Is there a level of diminishing returns when you get too much density where, you know, the cost of services goes up per unit? You know, what's the sweet spot? And this would seem like a perfect spot to put whatever that sweet spot is there.
Right.
And John, I don't know if there's any research to what you were saying, but it makes sense to me. And to the extent that, let's say that there was a market assessment that said boomers want to have a secondary home to meet their grandkids and have a place in Florida, they're going to want to have a condominium that's not 5 in a building. They're not going to buy that.
Right, yeah.
So it seems to me, just piggybacking on what John was saying, it would be a, 2 or 3 or 4 max, tastefully done unit if there's a market for that. It also seems, somebody had mentioned at one of our meetings, that a lot of the boomers' kids are priced out of this marketplace. So, if they're going to have one child or no children, a higher end, nice, affordable, I can live in Lake Country. There's not a marketplace for that today that I'm aware of.
Well, Amy, to answer your question, wouldn't it be up to a developer to propose something to the city that is feasible to develop and desirable to the city? Rather than us defining 3 units, 4 units.
You can, depending on what's appropriate for that particular site, that's what the zoning and land use plan do, is help control what comes in. Otherwise, people are gonna, come in with anything, and if you just leave it up to them to decide, then you don't really have any control mechanisms in place. And you may be forced into approving developments that aren't appropriate. So you have to be a little careful, you have to be careful. Otherwise, you're just opening up properties to whatever goes.
Yeah, I think you have to have some parameters to it so that it's not overbuilt.
Do Mike or Mayor Atwell, do you know why the village of Oconomowoc Lake owns both of those that's owned by the village? Both of those properties, those big properties are actually owned by the village.
I think one of them was maybe a gun range for.
It is currently the one to the south.
Oconomowoc Lake. Yeah.
And I think the north one, sorry to interrupt, but I think the north one where that diamond-shaped pond is, I believe that was used as a quarry for the Highway 16 construction, and that's just the remnant piece.
One of those Oconomowoc parcels is a gun range, and is where Delafield police officers and others do shoot regularly.
A lot. If you go out there, you hear it.
So, I would just say before making any recommendation, kind of go back to what we said at the beginning, is gather this information, look at the properties we're talking to, and at the end after we looked at the entire city of Delafield, there may be 20 other locations. Sure. We're looking at higher density, and we're going to oversaturate where you can build higher density. So I think we all understand what would go well there.
Yep. I think we can move on.
Do you want to seek consensus that this should be more dense or less dense than what is currently on the map, just to get a feel before we move on? Or do
is
you
there
think
anyone
everybody...
that objects to more density than 1 unit per 2 or 3 acre out here? Any objections?
My only objection is I'm not disagreeing with it, but I just think we haven't looked at anything else yet.
Yeah, I'll say
it's
no
not the
preliminary.
Vote yet. This is just to kind of get a feel.
Yeah, but no, I would agree, but more density would be better.
And we need context from the rest of the city.
Are there any objections at this point to condominium style? No? Okay. All right, well, I think we can move off of that particular piece.
Was that number 192?
It's 92.
092.
092. Okay, then going south, somebody put a sticker on 10. That's actually in the village of Neshota. So we unfortunately do not have any say there. So I'm going to remove that one, okay? Then we have 118 and 91, 2 separate comments. So 91 was potentially condos.
I need help again.
And 118 was park.
You know what we're talking about here.
And I will go to this on GIS is a little bit easier.
When she goes here, I'll be able to tell you.
I'm gonna go to them on, what's that?
Can you just repeat which sticker was?
Numbers,
Oh, so
118 and number
Right
91.
here. Okay, got it.
Can you point to the
Oh,
number just so
I'm
we see
sorry.
what it's?
Okay, so number 118 is here. You guys can see the cursor fine. That's the park. Number 91, which might be the same property, these are just two different people's comments, condos.
Looks like
Okay.
a bunch of trees. What is there today?
So then we will go
woods.
to, it's easier to do this on, I can arrange this a little differently for our next meeting. Maybe have a more interactive map. So, I think this is the property, right?
Yeah, it's owned by the Gale family.
So right now, it's owned by the Gale family. I think its intention was to be in a conservation easement, but that has never happened. So we don't, at this point, really know what will happen with the property.
So this is just north of that farm, is that right? Below that's the farm field, the Gale Farm Field?
Yeah, that was part of Neshota House.
Okay.
So
got it.
this is just directly east
And that's your
of
Mission Prairie.
Mission
Yeah,
Prairie
okay,
subdivision.
Got it.
So I've had conversations with John Gale. This is just anecdotal, but he has no intentions of turning that into a park. He's got people that hunt it now, and a lot of neighbors walk it, but he has zero intention of making it a park. And he doesn't want to sell it.
So, and this is one big property. So if we discuss this property, we should really look at it as a whole.
Almost 260 acres.
Doesn't he put most of his in conservancy?
Most of them, this was not, it
Never?
was purchased to be farmland, but he didn't conserve it.
There's that number 5, like on a board. We've got those sticky
And is it
things.
zoned agricultural?
Yes, it is.
The land use plan shows it as ag.
This whole, what's left as ag in this corner of the city is all agricultural. So I don't know, knowing what Gail's typical long-term intent is it worth pursuing different possibilities at this time?
Well, I guess you could ask the question, if it came on the market tomorrow, what would be the highest and greatest use for it? And, with all the woods in there, it would seem to fit the conservation subdivision concept.
Which was, the history of that was that Neshota House was looking for money about 15 years ago.
It was going to be a golf course, wasn't it?
There was talk about that. They put an RFP out for people to present a plan of whatever they thought would be the best use, and then they selected one. And the board at the time decided that they would just hold tight. And then John Gale came in and bought the entire thing. The portion that's in the village of Neshota and the city of Delafield. And he said to everybody that he would put a conservation easement over it, and he hasn't yet done that. And then when he got in trouble for the manure spreading, he quickly put a sign on it for sale. So I don't think that he would be in that situation if he had a conservation easement, then he wouldn't be able to sell it for nearly what he bought it for. So it's a tricky balance between those things, but that's sort of the brief history of it. I think he's owned it for 7, 8 years, maybe 6, 7 years, something like that.
Do you know what he paid for it and what a developer would view the value of it today?
He paid a pretty good price for it. Probably the value of what he paid for it right now would be a little bit less than what it would be worth as a development. Maybe on par or just a little bit more for that property, but I'd have to look at it. I'm just going from memory.
So the subdivision to the southeast and the subdivision directly west are both in the rural estate category, which is a 1 unit per 2 acre density. So without having this group conversation, if somebody came in and met with me and said, I'd like to amend the category out of agricultural to a residential district, typically what we do in the planning world is look at the adjacent uses and whether or not an amendment would work that's compatible with the adjacent uses. So that would be my like off-the-cuff recommendation is the adjacent subdivisions that are being developed around you are at 1 unit per 2 acre. It's possible that that Village of Neshota subdivision may be a little bit higher density.
I think those are 1 acre.
It's hard because they're
lots.
1 acre lots, but it looks like a conservation subdivision, so it might be developed at 1 unit per 2 acre. I think that.
Looks like about 1.5 acres density.
So that could be a little bit of a higher density than what Delafield offers right now. And I think, Mike, is this property served, would it be served by sewer?
So there would be a need for a lift station on the south end.
I think it was from Valley Road Farm where that stub is where we had planned on it going.
And right now it's.
A Mike.
So there, when this was bought by the Gale family, this is low pressure sewer here, but the plan would be that this would turn into gravity with a lift station in this area to service, and that all drains down. So there'd be some additional cost to serve it by sewer.
Can it be developed on septic?
No.
Like it's not an option?
That's not an option for ordinance.
So, one other thing to just point out, it's typically in municipal ordinances, a 1 unit per 2 or 3 acre density is really low for property served with sewer. Because for one, you're able to manage that septic waste differently and you need less land for it, but it's also a very expensive service for the developer to have to install. So I just want to point that out. But
And can I just add to that? That it's expensive for the developer, but the developer doesn't really care if he can sell his lots. It's a pass-through. So it only makes the lots more expensive is the bottom line. The developer doesn't eat it unless it changes in some point during the process of the development. It gets really expensive because of something that was overlooked. Otherwise, that cost is just pushed on to the end user.
any comments on this property?
The only thing I
Keep
would
things
say,
moving.
other than what's been said, is I think that development of that, whatever would be highly controversial, because I think people have passionate, at least the people that I talk to in the neighborhood have passionate views about that property. That may be true of every property we talk about, but I just think it's going to be, it would be controversial to turn that into a massive subdivision.
So
Maybe that's just part of the deal.
One thing with this and maybe Binkowski, the one we just talked about, if you encourage a planned development, and that's where the incentives come in, is it actually bumps people that direction, you can force the protection of like the wooded area and the corridor. So even though that your land use plan says 1 unit per 5 acre, you can write it right in your code that, you know, unless some unusual circumstance exists, or you need to punch a road through because it's the only practical way, you can actually require the protection in its entirety, which might be an option too.
Of the environmental corridor.
Right.
You're talking, not the entire property.
And provide that density, so like you could have 1 unit per 5 acre density in the corridor, but have them build it outside of the corridor. So you give them that bonus in allowing them to construct a lot somewhere else, but not within the corridor.
Maybe this is like what was your term, like agro division or something? And
An agri-hood?
Agri-hood, that was it, yeah. I mean, this, because I think people, one of the things that strikes me when we're going through this is that, you know, and maybe we're good eliminating all agricultural land from the city, but this is one of the few. There are only a couple of these left, and I think we're going to talk about developing every single one of them. And maybe this is a place where you could sort of integrate both and satisfy that constituency and also have some, preserve some level of agricultural vibe at least.
With
Or
the
maybe that ship has sailed, I don't know, maybe just that we're past that point.
With the conservation subdivision, one of the advantages is that it can pull the development away from those roads and keep corridors of green along there. You can even see it in the one to the east, in the Shota Farm. There's a big chunk of that in the middle that's ag use. But that could be balanced with those lots getting pulled back just slightly. There's a ball field in the middle. Maybe it's a meadow, but it's not. It's not developed. That was me.
I think the challenge with the agri-HUD is the reality of modern farming is just not really that compatible. I mean, it may be nostalgic to think about that, but when you've got a 30-ton John Deere tractor coming down the road on both lanes, towing a disc harrow, dropping mud all over the place, you think differently.
Right. People want a quaint pumpkin farm. With
you have to have access points and.
So I've reviewed a couple agri-HUDs, and typically they end up either being horse farms where there's a common horse barn that the people use, or common garden space.
Yeah, like
your open space is really a community garden space with a common barn associated with it. But I've never really seen successfully in our area, just because these ag fields are getting smaller and smaller, and so there's a practicality of just being able to farm it successfully, actual farming.
And the dust.
Crop
I
farming.
mean, 3 weeks ago when we had that 40-mile-an-hour wind and everybody was planting their fields, it's a little bit messy.
Any comments? Any proposed changes to agricultural on this property? Anything? Otherwise, for now, I'm going to suggest from your comments, no change. Okay. 93 is the same, so same property. And 119, what is that now? Oh, that's St. John's. We're skipping St. John's for the, we'll save that for, I think that's the only sticker. That's also on the other map for downtown. But then I have 111. Oh, you know what, there's two map 5s.
Right.
Right.
Where was
111 is on this one, on
111.
Bankowski.
Okay, so it's same as Bidkowski.
Right.
So we're done with, map 5 is complete,
Yeah.
okay? So Mike, now we're on to map number 1.
Was 5 the one we just did? Okay.
I have too many things going on here, sorry.
There's a lot going on this one.
Map number 1, oh, because now we're on 83.
Well, I might be able to find that one without your help.
Well, let's talk about this one. I think it came from, I don't mean to call you out, but I think it came from Bob. Number 109.
Is that from me?
Didn't that come from you?
I don't.
No?
I don't think so, yeah.
Oh, I thought that this one was the one where you were talking about like preservation of. Okay, so 109 is up here, right along Highway 16, and my comment on the sheet says mixed-use residential.
It's all
It's that
marshland,
dog
isn't
walking
it?
park right now, right? People just walk through there.
It's a preserve,
Yeah,
yeah. It's,
mixed-use
Especially you
residential.
can't touch
It's
that.
the fire station and those apartment buildings, right?
yeah.
Today?
This is east of that, where
Yeah,
it's
this
part
is
of the
east.
Lois Jensen Preserve.
Right.
Okay.
I think there's 2 conservation easements, or there's the preserve and then there's a conservation easement, right?
Yeah, and I think, just looking at this, it looks like it's probably fairly unbuildable.
Yeah, I don't think it's buildable. I could never see that.
It's a floating tamarack bog is what it is. So
Right.
I don't think you're putting it.
Okay, so that's
the
a part.
newest innovation in development in Wisconsin.
Okay, should we move off of that one?
Can't ever
Anyone, any
coils or
complaints
what?
about moving off of that 109?
Nope.
I apologize if I'm not making this, my screen looks different from what you're looking at, so. Okay, number 108 and 136 are presumably on the same property. And for one, I've got commercial/industrial potentially. And 136, I've got business, office park, light industrial. So both proposals include business type uses. Right
That's
now,
on the former Dick Morris property.
it's agricultural.
Or not David Morris property.
Is this 83? This is 83, right?
So Amy, the red line is 83, is that 83 right there? This is
Yes.
bordering on 83,
Okay.
okay.
Yes. So just south of Vettelson, call it, and west of 83.
There's a frontage road, Campbell's Trace.
Yeah, Campbell Trace is this, it's a long, like 3/4 mile long driveway. I don't know if you can see it, but it comes in right across from Cardinal Lane in 83, drops down, it's just a simple driveway that goes up to the top of the hill behind ULS. And there's 5 or 6 homes up here. It's like a big cul-de-sac.
Oh, so this property has been on the market and I've gotten a lot of calls, if you can see the
40
cursor.
acres.
What's goofy about this area, not the kind of pattern of development I would promote, these are all hodgepodge lots with no access to a public road. So you just have, like John said, this long driveway, which makes the development of this back parcel impractical because it would be creating yet another lot not abutting a public road, which the city does not condone.
And that's a big hill.
So what?
Yes. So that band of woods on the east side of that little cluster of lots is probably about a 45-foot drop. You can see it there in the top.
Yeah, it would almost make more sense if those houses accessed Nagawicka Road to the west than 83 to the east.
Except the topography, I think.
Yeah, I don't think you could get it. It's such a drop down there. Unless you could get through ULS.
Yeah, tie into the ULS soccer building.
But once you get to ULS, there's a little ridge there and then it drops like vertically down.
So I think all those parcels are owned by the same entity, right?
So, well, no. So
Yes.
right now, what we're talking about is Morris.
Okay.
Sela owns the property to the south, which is also tagged. But Morris owns the property directly abutting the railroad tracks too. So this is, again, all agricultural. Comments?
That wooded band along the west side there drops about, let's see, go from 1,005 to 950, so 55 feet of topography there.
So do they own? Okay. So right now, these parcels are landlocked. They need the property they own along 83.
And is that a farm? Right
Yeah,
on
Dave
83?
Morris owns the farm right there in that funky little, whatever you call it, shape. Kind of an H.
I mean, whoever put the note down, it strikes me that commercial, industrial, that this is one of the few places where that makes some sense. I mean, obviously you have to have access to 83, but if you have access to 83 and you're right off of 16 and there's already all kinds of.
Well, it puts it adjacent to the Heartland Industrial Park, so it just makes sense.
Right across,
Obvious.
And you
You
have the
have-
school to the west.
You have a signal right at Cardinal Lane, but you also have two different property owners. You have Sela and the Morris property.
Which one is Sela?
The one right at Cardinal, just west of Cardinal, the bigger one. Goes all the way down to Park River.
So the city does have a category, planned mixed use might be an interesting category because it kind of seems like, there might be multiple options that may be appropriate for this area.
The hard part would be, how do you, if it were industrial, which it lays out perfectly because it's pan flat. So there's nothing better for industrial than that. But how do you transition to the area to the south where you're probably going to get more residential?
Would you do residential, or would you transition from more of a commercial industrial, not on the line of the Heartland Industrial Park, but what's the one to the south? Is that the Geeson development where you have a higher end type of industrial building in there? And then as you transition south, you go into maybe a higher end office type, if we're even going to have those in
That's the big
the next
question.
decade. But you could, because then you're back into the wooded areas and you're overlooking kind of the Bark River floodplain there and that. I mean, that would be a pretty nice area for some high end corporate development back there.
Do you know, Amy, is Campbell Trace an easement on Sela property? It's not carved out, so it must be
It
an easement.
is.
So you could relocate that. I think that was what the plan was.
I don't
Wasn't it,
know if
Mike,
there's even.
when Sela came in?
So Campbell's Trace runs parallel to 83.
There's
And then
one
that-
little bit.
And then that private drive is just a private drive. So there's right of way.
Like, show us on the big map.
On yours, can you point to Campbell Trace? It comes in off of,
I don't know which one is.
And it's
Oh,
half
this right here you're
Heartland,
talking
yeah.
about?
So
This?
you come in and it accesses these different
That's a public road.
homes here. It's a public road. And this is where the sewer and water have been extended. So all this, now we're talking municipal water that can be serviced for these parcels along with the sewer.
but my question was, the location of Campbell Trace east-west is not
So
is not
that's
permanent in that location. It can
No,
be, it could be relocated.
Yeah, that's not Campbell's Trace. It's a private drive that
Are you
goes
talking about
back to
this right
those
here?
four.
Cardinal, what's across from
Yeah,
Cardinal
Cardinal
Lane?
Lane is here. Campbell's Trace is here.
Right here.
Campbell Trace is a frontage road,
Yes.
but the
And then the
people
road that says private road.
Yeah,
Oh.
the private
Right there.
road is
Yeah.
just a private access easement.
the houses up there call that Campbell Trace, or their address
Oh,
is
they do?
technically
Oh,
on
okay.
Campbell Trace. That's why I asked that.
What are the three parcels in a row that are up
These
there?
are, yeah, these are just existing homes.
And then there's that funky cluster of
Well,
lots.
that's further
Farther
south.
south.
Yep.
That's not the wedding venue up there.
No.
No.
Further
It
south.
would be further south.
What about, like, there was that one picture, the development wasn't super desirable, but kind of that
Like an office park?
missing middle type development where you've got commercial along 83, maybe some condos, and then single family in the back.
That'd be a great way to
Surrounding-
transition from the busyness of 83, which is eventually going to be 4 lanes, to that sort of enclave of potential single family.
'Cause I think you kind of got to look at this whole stretch as a whole. If you think commercial and industrial is appropriate up here and then it's not here, you're going to have a weird compatibility issue.
Yes.
And you've got residential properties on the west bordering this property. So,
They'd flip out if you put,
but that whole mixed, like going commercial, condo, single-family to transition is becoming pretty popular in areas. I mean, I don't know what the market is here in Delafield, but pretty popular.
Everything's Commons, the 6 lots or 5 lots.
Right here?
Right there, that is planned to be extended. You know, there's a temporary
Oh.
cul-de-sac there, but the right-of-way, that was always the plan to get that connected up over to 83 somehow.
So you could have residential here, and then it goes north into something.
Residential to multifamily or condo, and then office park, and then industrial. You could almost have that layered coming down.
I think the industrial component in office park would be really challenging to mix with the residential. Like Amy said, it's almost one or the other. But I think the compatibility with the uses to the west and south that would be a challenge to fit it in there with industrial. It would be awesome to have industrial, more new industrial in the city because, as Amy said, it's what do you?
Well, the
it's a
ROI on
low
it's going to be
load.
the best you can get.
Yeah.
What about really light industrial? You create, I don't know what create a district where it's really light. There's so many people that come in with hardly definable industrial. It hardly meets the definition, but it does because they manufacture, and so they don't fit.
Well, the future is going to be warehouse distribution primarily. I mean, you're going to have a much greater demand for that than the traditional industrial. And there's always, light components of manufacturing involved with some of those uses, but for the most part, it's the DCs and distribution side that is.
I mean, like that Prestwick project that was proposed for the south of 94, I mean, that was manufacturing, but it was
light manufacturing.
It was very light, and it didn't. It's not what people have in mind. I don't know. Maybe.
No, I mean, if you look at their facility in Sussex, you'd love to have a facility like that. What they're doing on the, in that new area of Sussex there across from Meyer.
Do these 2,000 square foot like condo flex spaces, workspaces qualify as light industrial?
It depends on
Like
the
a
use
flex
that's
building?
allowed within them. So it depends. Like you could have a building like that that's commercial, industrial, mixed use. It would depend. Do you want to, for now, just to move off because it's 9:30 and we can end after this chunk? For now, it sounds like maybe a mixed use environment is appropriate out here.
Mhm.
And am I including the Sela property?
I think you'd have to.
Yeah. They're gonna combine at some point. There's gonna be connectivity. And then is there anything south of that?
Yes.
One thing,
This right here?
138.
There is a trail corridor that's on the official city map
Oh,
to
that's
run
the one.
through this whole thing.
So this is the Mike was talking about, a road extension through here. And then, is this part of?
That's part of Sela.
Okay.
Yep. Yep. And then this piece south of that is us.
Well, the river is a good break point for now, I think, and that, like, theoretically, we could split uses at the river anyway. So I think for tonight, let's stop at the river. Any other comments other than me adding notes about mixed-use environment being appropriate?
Quick question on this. So we're talking about Sela, like the school that wanted to build there and built in. So like, is that for sale, or we're assuming that they're not going to build another school? I mean, we don't know.
I haven't heard
I mean, I would assume
anything
that
on
that's
this property.
probably a fairly short-term opportunity, right? I mean, what are they got? Why are they sitting on that land?
Because he can.
I would just look at it at this point as
I
developable
think you have to
parcel.
plan it as if it's going to be developed.
Waiting for it to be zoned properly, I guess.
Maybe that's it.
Mixed-use environment. That's all? Potentially to include Commercial, are we industrial too, or in certain areas?
Before making a decision on that, I think it would be really important to just get a visual of what that could look like, because I think everybody in the room probably has a different picture in their mind of what that could be. So what could we use as a good example?
Brookfield Lakes Corporate Center. That would be more of a high-end, not industrial, corporate environment. Just pick any good Trammell Crow development.
And those are good, but they're not trending right now.
Understood.
Which they could be in 10 years. You never know.
Well, that's why, like, some of this stuff, I don't think your end recommendation has to get specific, because the market is going to drive what actually happens. Mixed use might be all you need. What it does, though, is it offers somebody the opportunity to come in and propose something versus it being agricultural, which doesn't work. So sometimes over-designing results in its own complexities, or preparing master plans, because things shift so quickly.
Medical clinic could also be a fit there.
Yeah.
Another hospital.
No, we don't need another hospital, but medical clinics are going up all over the place.
You look at the need with the boomers for assisted living and sort of step-down housing where you keep, or progressional, whatever you want to call it. There's about 20 different names for it.
A lot of senior living too,
Senior
multifamily
living.
apartments and senior living.
But that middle is an important thing that we should talk about a lot.
Yeah. Okay, so I think tonight we'll close there, and starting next week, we're going to move on, and then, again, we'll come back to this, but what's that? June 8th, did I say next week? June 8th, and for the next meeting, not the next meeting, but we cancel the meeting.
June 8th is.
So do you want to talk about when you might be available to add on a meeting?
Well, we have potential for the 15th. Do we want to keep that?
We do, but I think we might have to, so that would be probably that will be a mandatory meeting, and then we'll need a new optional date. So we can always talk about that next meeting, but if you want to just think about it, I will say having at least a 2-week break is very helpful for us, because there's a lot of planning that has to be done in between. So come with a couple of dates, preferably keeping them on Tuesdays if we can, and we'll go from there, okay?
So, can I entertain a motion to adjourn?
So moved. Scott?
Second.
Second. Yep. Craig? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All right. Thank you, everybody.
All right.